You think wearing a badge is enough to silence me, Miller. In the crowded supermarket, Naomi Carter, the hospital's security chief, stood alone. Yet her eyes were sharp enough to strangle the abusive cop. A daylight betrayal, turning a once arrogant man into a trembling prey before hundreds of cameras. Behind this counterattack lay a reminder. Justice fears no uniform. It only fears those who bow to injustice. And you, in whichever state you are, what would happen if this happened to you? The midday heat was oppressive, and the sunlight streaming from the parking lot canopy onto the windshield made Naomi Carter squint. She had just finished her morning shift at the hospital, with the afternoon shift still ahead, but right now her smallest need was clear: a few vitamin pills, a box of herbal tea to soothe the lingering headache from the previous night's overnight duty. The silver sedan was neatly parked among the tightly packed cars. Naomi turned off the engine, took out the keys, sat still for a moment to smooth back the loose strands of hair at the nape of her neck, and took a deep breath. From her left, a car door slammed. A gust of wind slipped through the slightly open window, carrying vague complaints, perhaps a housewife grumbling about prices or a child shrieking for ice cream. Naomi ignored it all, stretched, stepped out of the car, gently tugging the worn seams at the shoulders of her light blue nurse uniform. When her heels touched the hot asphalt, Naomi was acutely aware of several pairs of eyes turning toward her. In those eyes was something: curiosity, caution, or simply the habit of labeling anyone with dark skin as out of place here. But she had learned to endure those looks like drinking a glass of cold water, silent, steady, unbothered. Naomi had her own way of striking back, and no one knew where she kept it. Not even those who once thought they could humiliate her with a cheap set of handcuffs. A few rows away, under the shade of a white patrol SUV with blue stripes, Officer Grady Miller leaned against the driver's door, the sun glinting off the badge on his shoulder. One hand absent-mindedly held the glossy black radio strap, the other adjusted his baseball cap, his eyes fixed on Naomi, weaving between parked cars toward the shopping cart lane. Grady glanced at his watch, tapped his fingernails on the glass a few times, then shifted position as if he were just a cop dutifully patrolling. But he was not that free. A neatly dressed black woman driving her own car, shopping alone at midday. In his eyes, nothing about that was trustworthy. Naomi felt the dry gust sweep past her neck. She did not turn her head, but knew without looking that the officer was still there, like a dark lump waiting to press down on her day. Her hand tightened slightly on her handbag strap, not out of fear, but to remind herself to keep breathing evenly. Before pushing the cart out of the parking row, she paused, bent down to check the side mirror, a redundant gesture, but enough for her eyes to skim straight through the frosted glass and meet Grady's. Their gazes met, swift as scissors gliding across paper, one side hiding a knife, the other already armored. Naomi closed her car door, walked away, leaving behind the police shadow, rooted in the scorching lot, patient as if the predator's game had just begun. Naomi slowly pushed the cart through the security gate. The wheels scraped softly against the asphalt groove, making a steady clicking sound beneath the glaring canopy. The cold air from the automatic sliding door was not strong enough to dispel the lingering heat clinging to her uniform's shoulders. She blinked, inhaled deeply, mentally listing the items: chamomile tea, vitamin C, a box of yogurt for long shifts, a few packets of protein bars for snacks. Her hand on the cart handle trembled slightly, as if brushing off sun dust, but her eyes remained calm, steely. Behind her, the unmistakable tapping of leather shoes on the tiled floor echoed. Grady Miller did not bother to hide. He strolled no more than 3 steps behind Naomi, occasionally stopping to peer at the bread counter or sports drinks shelf, pretending to be a casual customer. But every time Naomi moved forward, his shadow stretched after her like an invisible leash. He did not conceal his stare. It drilled into the back of her neck, as if measuring the spine of prey before sinking fangs in. Along the main aisle, the fruit stand glowed under LED lights. Shiny red apples, purple grapes, yellow oranges piled in woven plastic baskets. Promotional signs posted at angles. employees in green uniforms rushing about, barcode scanners beeping, mixed with the whir of large fans pumping cold air that could not overpower the heavy summer afternoon smell clinging to shoppers' clothes. Naomi glanced over, uninterested in stopping. She approached the pharmacy counter, shifted her card aside, pulled an old, frayed wallet from her coat pocket, took out her hospital ID along with a small piece of paper with a self-written prescription. Grady stopped at the bottled drinks shelf, holding a 500 ml sports drink but did not bother to read the label. He stared through the shelf, confident Naomi would not notice. His mind raced through a quick calculation. A black woman alone, no cameras around, no one daring to argue with a cop in a crowd. It was as simple as slipping a pack of supplements into her bag and pulling it out in front of a few people. He had done this several times, and each time it went smoothly. Easy. This type never fights back. That thought curled his lips into a thin, sharp smile. At the pharmacy counter, a young pharmacist bowed his head to greet Naomi, his eyes quickly scanning the name tag pinned to her chest before bowing with more respect than to other customers. Naomi handed over the prescription and showed her card. The light from the counter spotlight illuminated the name tag. Naomi Carter, Head of Security and Nursing Supervisor. A small detail, but sharp eyes would understand she was no ordinary nurse. The pharmacist scanned her card, carefully packed the medicine, and lowered his voice. "Do you need anything else?" Naomi shook her head, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "No, thank you." Sergeant, a few steps away, a store clerk stacking milk cartons, caught sight of Grady standing too close to Naomi. He paused, frowned slightly, a fleeting look, but enough to plant a seed of suspicion in the seemingly harmless atmosphere of the brightly lit aisle. Naomi put her card back in her wallet, zipped her coat pocket carefully, her hand still smelling faintly of carbon paper from the prescription. She did not turn immediately, but looked up at the long shadows cast on the glossy tile floor. Grady's towering figure stood behind her, the shadow stretching like a velvet-covered nail strip. Naomi smiled slightly, silently, then turned just enough for her eyes to sweep across him. Grady hid his smile, his left hand slowly sliding along the edge of his outer vest. A small gesture, but inside the pocket his fingertips touched the pristine supplement packet, ready for a perfect, caught-in-the-act moment. The cold air from the AC still whispered overhead, but along Naomi's back, a streak of heat like a knife blade pressed lightly at her neck, a signal that the hunting game had begun, waiting for the prey to turn its back to sink claws into its weakest point. Grady Miller pushed open the supermarket glass door with his shoulder, the cold air causing the beads of sweat on his temples to tighten. His steps were steady as always, his police uniform crisp, the badge gleaming under the cold white lights. He glanced past the customer service counter, nodded at the older cashier, tossed out a casual greeting, then immediately returned his focus to his true target, Naomi Carter's back, as she struggled to fit several boxes of tea into her shopping basket. Grady knew women like her very well. He had seen dozens, even hundreds. They often lowered their heads, muttering apologies, even when they had done nothing wrong. They did not believe anyone would protect them, much less dare to argue with a white officer face to face. In Grady's mind, all laws were merely a cloth draped over the harsh reality of the strong dominating the weak. He knew how to use the police badge to bend the truth, and who was paving the way for him at the station. Bosses sitting in cold rooms, exchanging silence for impressive reports. Many years ago, Grady was internally reported for breaking the ribs of a drunk black teenager. The boy's mother was a janitor, his father deceased. Grady only lost his badge for 3 months before returning to duty with a commendation for firmly suppressing violent crime. The whole matter was swept under the rug like a bloodstain wiped hastily from an old station floor. He loved how the law always belonged to those in uniform. He licked his lips slightly, his gaze locked tightly on Naomi from the fruit aisle all the way to the pharmacy. He carefully memorized each of her movements, how she leaned to search her purse for her wallet or tucked her hair behind her ear when on the phone. Her thin fabric bag had no zipper, a perfect opportunity to hide something she had not purchased. Grady strolled past the cookie aisle, occasionally bending to pick up a snack box, glancing at the label as if weighing the price. A heavy-set man pushed a cart blocking his path. Grady lightly lifted the radio on his shoulder, pressed the button, and whispered like confiding in a ghost. "Tom, I'm at Market 5 Supermarket. Maintain frequency. Might need you to witness a sting." A crackling reply came briefly, then ended. Grady did not need to say more. His team understood how he worked. Silent, observant, paperwork, done. He smirked slightly as Naomi turned her back, still unaware and busy with her notes. The supermarket now felt like a giant cage, and Grady was the only wolf who knew the way out, who knew how to turn an innocent into a criminal, right in front of dozens of witnesses waiting in the checkout line. He estimated it would take no more than 10 minutes to turn the proud nurse into a handcuffed dog. He stepped closer, close enough to hear Naomi asking the pharmacist about a tea to aid sleep. His fingers toyed with the silver badge on his left chest, the emblem that had saved him countless times from futile complaints by single mothers or janitor fathers. In his mind, he had already mapped the plan. Approach, remind her to check her bag, extract the evidence, call the patrol team by radio, and escort her away like leading a lamb. He bowed his head, took a slow, deep breath to suppress the thrill running down his spine. To Grady, Naomi Carter was no different from that teenager back then, alone, vulnerable, no one to stand behind her and call for justice. And above all, he enjoyed crushing the fragile pride of people like her. He only needed one flick of his hand, one command, and coincidentally stationed cop outside the supermarket door to block every escape route. A cold energy drink could touch his palm, the sharp peppermint scent stinging his nose. He squeezed the can lightly, a satisfied smile sliding across his lips. The radio on his shoulder remained silent, like a loyal accomplice. Naomi Carter, the woman confident in her hospital uniform, had only minutes left to realize who really had the claws among these tidy shelves. Grady turned toward the beverage aisle, eyes scanning the rows of mint cans and iced teas, but actually not reading any labels. He casually picked up a bottle of mineral water, tossed a packet of dried beef snacks into his handheld basket. His face showed slight fatigue, a few wet strands clinging to his forehead, a man making a quick purchase for a long shift. Anyone glancing his way would see a normal, reassuring figure, especially with the police badge glinting on his left chest. He continued following Naomi, keeping just enough distance to avoid suspicion. The scent of air freshener mixed with human odor and baked goods made the atmosphere heavier. Naomi pushed her cart past the dry food section, occasionally tightening her grip on the handle. Though she did not look back, she clearly heard the steady tapping of police shoes on the shiny plastic floor. Each of Grady's steps felt like a pin pricking deliberately close to her neck, causing her back to burn intermittently. Naomi reminded herself to breathe deeply, count her heartbeats, and never show the slightest crack. Grady veered toward the cookie shelf, pretending to pick up a box of almonds. He glanced at the checkout counters. 3 lanes crowded. Good. The busier the better to create a crowd effect that would believe the badge. He carefully moved in an arc. Whenever Naomi stopped at a shelf, he shifted to the nearest one, just enough to keep sight of her cream-colored purse hanging loosely on her cart. An older man pushing a cart filled with soda and vegetables accidentally blocked Grady when he tried to close the distance. Grady froze, darkening his eyes. His gaze alone made the man stiffen, awkwardly move the cart aside, and mutter apologies. With just one look, Grady could intimidate any civilian. The fierce wolf need not howl. A quiet growl was enough to scatter the flock. Grady's fingers brushed the edge of his vest pocket, lightly rubbing the neatly wrapped supplement packet hidden inside, the rustling plastic beneath the uniform fabric. He imagined the packet safely tucked inside Naomi's purse, waiting for his hand to pull it out in front of everyone, accompanied by the accusing words, "stealing," delivered in the sternest voice of the law. He knew knew well, no one dared defy a police officer, especially before a crowd waiting to check out, minds busy counting money, too preoccupied to care about truth or lies. Naomi took a deep breath as her cart wheels rolled toward the third checkout lane, where customers stood packed tightly near the gum rack. She bent down to rearrange her items: tea, yogurt, and a protein bar. All had receipts. She knew too well, how the shadow behind her moved, how many times it stalked her like a predator's instinct. But Naomi also knew the hunter would not strike until the right place was chosen, and Grady had chosen the checkout lane, where the beeping scanner would drown out resistance, where customers just wanted to pay quickly and escape the hassle. Grady stood right behind Naomi's cart, his breath warming the back of her neck. One hand rested on his gun belt at his side, the other tightly holding the snack basket strap. The scent of sweat mixed with the metallic smell of the gun wafted to Naomi's nose. She bit her lip lightly, throat dry, but her back remained straight. In Grady's mind, the final plan played out. Order Naomi to open her purse, reach in and pull out the supplement packet before witnesses, call patrol partner Tom outside by radio, write the report, and escort her away. A clean, neat performance, without a trace. He imagined the sound of handcuffs snapping onto Naomi's wrists, her proud eyes crushed into fear. Then he would stand before the crowd, declaring, "Justice has been served." The queue slowly edged forward. Naomi placed each item on the conveyor belt. Grady squinted, lips curling slightly, hand sliding off his vest pocket, ready to pull the trigger of the final hunt. His breath carried the heavy smell of tobacco, brushing against Naomi's neck like a silent signal. "It's time to kill your hope, little girl." The line of people wound like a slow-moving full snake across the shiny tiled floor. The beep of barcode scanners, the rasp of receipts printing, and a housewife's complaints about rising milk prices blended into a chaotic noise. But for Naomi Carter, all these sounds faded into the background, overtaken by another noise, the uneven breathing of a man just behind her neck. She adjusted the handbag loosely hanging on the shopping cart handle, eyes fixed on the electronic display flashing the total amount. Her heart skipped a beat when a large shadow blocked the overhead light. Grady Miller stood so close that Naomi could hear the radio on his shoulder brushing against the collar of his shirt. The smell of burnt sweat mixed with cheap deodorant and the scent of nylon bags from the cart at their feet. Ahead, a young mother was calming her screaming child, demanding more candy. An old man cleared his throat and complained to the cashier about the disorder. "Where are the guards? What kind of order is this? People pushing like this?" Naomi barely heard the words before a sharp breath caught in her throat. This chaos was exactly the opportunity Grady had been waiting for. "Please let me move ahead to maintain some order. The crowd is pushing too much." His voice was low but firm enough to make 3 or 4 people in front shift aside. The badge on his chest was a pass no one dared question. Grady shifted his feet lightly, raised his hand as if asking for the way, then brushed his hip and shoulder past Naomi, a touch enough to stiffen her spine. Naomi held her breath and stepped back half a pace, telling herself to stay calm, to stand tall, not to shrink like prey. But Grady had already pushed too close. He rested a hand lightly on his radio belt, his thumb nudging the talk button, as if waiting for a signal. The checkout area was nearly jammed, people rushing to scan their goods while avoiding the sharp gaze of the officer. A small movement was enough to choke the air. Naomi instinctively shifted right to avoid his hip pressing in, but her handbag hanging on the cart strap swung and slipped off the plastic clip, bumping her hip, then swinging loosely. Grady glanced quickly, his cold gaze like a blade sliding out of its sheath. "Sorry, ma'am, please let me." He spoke softly, almost like a model officer maintaining order. To onlookers, he was just a strong officer shielding a delicate woman. No one saw the serpent's tongue flick beneath the predator's smile. Naomi knew exactly what awaited her. She tried to remind herself, just stay calm. Don't let him read fear on your face. You are not a sheep. But her shoulders still shrank involuntarily as Grady deliberately leaned in closer. His breath brushed her ear, dry and acrid. "Miss Carter." His voice was a whisper, almost caressing yet filthy. "Don't worry. It will be over soon." Naomi turned her head, her face almost touching his scruffy jawline. Her breath hitched in her chest, throat tightening. In front of her, the scanner beeped continuously, and a receipt dropped with a soft rustle to the floor, unintentionally drowning out the frantic beat of her heart. The distance was now just an excuse for Grady to break down her last defenses. Naomi understood that at this moment she stood on the edge between innocent and criminal, waiting for the wolf to bare its fangs and sink them into her neck. Grady stepped back half a pace, adjusted his shoulder as if avoiding an old woman pushing a cart past the cookie shelf. His broad frame and the stretched uniform over his bulletproof vest shielded part of a ceiling mount camera. Naomi glanced toward the lens, barely catching a shadow cutting across the view. Grady's right hand still gripped a generic snack packet, the bag crackling softly from trapped air. But his left hand was the real dagger, slipping inside the inner vest pocket, pulling out a small, shiny, plastic-wrapped package sealed with adhesive tape. He didn't look at it, eyes still fixed on the price scanner screen, as if supervising Naomi's bill for fairness. In a split second, almost impossible to detect, Grady shifted his shoe half a hand's width forward, then twisted his shoulder, pretending to be pushed by the crowd. His wide, heavy shoulder collided straight into Naomi's, a bump not hard but enough to make her stagger, one hand grabbing the cart edge for balance. A faint rustling sound came from the snack bag hitting the checkout counter and rolling once. Grady bent down, half blocking the view of the people around. The hidden package slipped from his sleeve onto the shiny tile floor, sliding slightly before stopping near his polished black shoe. "Oh, Miss Carter, did you drop something?" His tone was casual as he cupped the package, fingernails tapping on the plastic with a crackling sound. Naomi froze, blinking. Before she could react or deny carrying drugs, Grady's hand, fast as a rattlesnake's tongue, pushed the package straight into the outer pocket of her fabric handbag, its zipper still open. The movement was so smooth that the cashier, less than a meter away, only heard the rustle, her eyes fixed on scanning codes, missing everything. Grady straightened, lightly brushing his pants at the knee, tapping the snack bag on Naomi's cart as if helping with a decent gesture. He smiled, white teeth gleaming under the fluorescent light. In those narrow eyes, the victorious triumph was as dark as ink. Naomi felt a cold chill run down her spine. She gripped her handbag strap tightly and turned slightly to check, but her hand froze mid-air. Everything remained intact. The bag still bulged slightly with water bottles and a personal medical kit. Nothing unusual, at least to the naked eye. "Miss Carter, all done? Not much in the cart, huh?" Grady's voice rose so a few nearby could hear, fake concern faintly coating his tone. Curious heads craned, eyes fixed on the shiny police badge on his chest, swallowing their questions before they could be spoken. In Grady's mind, the thought slid smoothly like spilled oil on tile. Caught. This time you can't deny it. He bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing aloud. Naomi took a deep breath, biting her lip. Something felt wrong. The instincts of an old security officer told her to check her bag immediately. But under the gaze of customers, the cashier, and Grady himself, she knew any search now would turn her into a fish trapped in a net. Grady stepped back, restoring the order observation position by the scanning counter. His hand still held the snack bag, tapping lightly, rhythmically like a drum beat, waiting for the moment the victim would trap herself. Naomi swallowed dryly, calming herself, but her palms had already begun to sweat. The trap was set, the safety catch flipped. Now, only the trigger squeeze remained. Among the vitamin aisle where the shelves rose to an adult's shoulder height, Naomi paused, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the glossy box surfaces. She hesitated for a moment when her hand touched the handbag strap, suddenly feeling heavier than usual, an unfamiliar weight that did not come from the water bottle or the blister pack she had just picked. Grady stood diagonally across the aisle, his shoulder casually leaning against the display shelf, two fingers tapping rhythmically on his thigh, his eyes betraying a predatory gleam. When Naomi's gaze accidentally met his, he pressed his lips together and smirked. like a hunter holding the tail of his prey. She switched hands holding the bag, pressing it tightly against her stomach, and pulled the cart closer to her feet to block the gap. A small movement, but enough to irritate Grady. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What, want to confess yourself, nurse? Save me the trouble of searching your bag in front of everyone?" Naomi said nothing. She turned her shoulders, angling her back to shield the bag, her eyes scanning quickly. The nearest camera was positioned diagonally behind Grady's back. The corridor leading to the checkout counter was exactly 7 steps long, and some housewives were focused on selecting snack boxes 2 shelves away. No one was close enough to hear their conversation clearly. More importantly, Grady dared not cause a scene here. He wanted a clean-cut, red-hand moment. No struggle, no opposing witnesses. Naomi's breath slowed and steadied, like a person accustomed to calming others in an emergency room. She swallowed once, set the cart down near her feet, and pressed the handbag strap deeper into her stomach. Grady reached out to snatch it, but she twisted her hips slightly, blocking him with her shoulder. Their eyes met again, no longer the look of predator and prey. Grady clearly saw in Naomi's gaze a flash like steel forged in fire, unexpectedly sharp and uncalculated. She breathed softly, her voice low but edged like a blunt knife. "Looking for something? Let me help you turn it inside out." Grady paused for half a second, his finger twitching before he tried to maintain calm. He pressed in closer with a crooked smile. "I got you. Admit it. Don't play games." His breath smelled of mint candy mixed with tobacco, brushing against Naomi's chin, but she didn't step back. A customer suddenly pushed a cart past them, paused briefly at their posture, then moved on, guessing it was just a petty money argument. The world, though tempting, was bound to divert as early as 30. Naomi did not take her eyes off Grady's gray ones. She knew well that if she yelled, he would flip the story to make her out as a thief, causing a scene. She would not let him touch her first. A wolf does not roar while its claws remain intact. She tilted her head, lips just 1 finger joint from Grady's ear. Her low voice fell into his ear like a stone dropped in an empty barrel. "You think I don't know this trick? You just slipped something into my bag. I'm just watching to see how far you'll try to play me." Grady clenched the bag strap, about to use more force, but Naomi grabbed his wrist, just enough to hold him back without making a sound. His male instinct warned him not to pull free. The trap, he thought locked, now bit back on his own tendons. Naomi exhaled lightly again, eyes locked on his, her thumb rubbing Grady's wrist like a predator testing its teeth before a meal. "You chose the wrong person, Miller. I'm standing right here waiting for you to dig your own grave." Grady swallowed hard, his lips sealed, but the dominance in his eyes slipped away, drifting toward Naomi like a knife returning to its rightful owner. Right there in the colorful vitamin aisle, a crack had split through the trap the overconfident hunter had yet to secure. Before Grady could purse his lips to hold on to authority, his right wrist was gripped tightly and bent like a breaking bone. He hissed softly, pain shooting up to his shoulder, causing muscles to twitch, but his throat was strangled, unable to utter a curse as usual. Naomi leaned in, her arm hooked around his wrist, twisting at the joint's weak point, while her other hand pressed lightly on his shoulder, forcing him back against the tallest vitamin shelf in the supermarket. The loud-mouthed policeman, moments before, was now pinned like a lizard's tail stuck to the wall. Grady's breath heaved in his chest, eyes darting to find an escape, but Naomi remained calm, her face only an arm's length from his. The bottles of vitamins A, D3, and fish oil on the shelf trembled slightly. A few boxes rolled to the wooden edge. One fell to the floor with a dry clatter, drawing the attention of 2 or 3 bystanders. They glanced over, then quickly looked down, murmuring, "Just a couple arguing over money." No one dared approach or pull out a phone to record, partly because of the police badge barely visible on Grady's chest. Naomi whispered, her voice thin like a blade pressed against his neck. "Shut up. Don't act here. If I squeeze a little more, your wrist will snap. Try yelling. See who will believe you." Grady ground his teeth, the tip of his nose reddening from anger and humiliation. A drop of sweat streamed from his temple, down a cheek as hard as stone. Naomi lowered her voice, deliberately emphasizing each word as if hammering blows into his neck. "I'm the chief of security at Central Hospital. I've taught counter-surveillance at the state prison. Want to try again? Let's see who cuffs who first." Grady swallowed dryly, hot breath flaring from his nostrils like a bull about to charge. He wanted to shout, "You bastard!" but his lips trembled, the sound escaping as a harsh hiss. His other hand searched down to his belt for his gun, but Naomi's arm blocked his wrist, a crackling snap, warning from his joints. Around them, housewives edged past the snack aisle, occasionally glancing before pretending to pick items. To them, it was just a loud couple. No one suspected a predator pinned down in the middle of the upscale vitamin section. Naomi leaned closer, the scent of camellia shampoo faintly overpowering the tobacco on Grady's breath. She curled her lips slightly, her eyes cold and sharp as steel scrapers. "You picked the wrong person. From now on, I will remember every dirty move you make, Miller." Grady tried to suppress trembling, his voice breaking into fragments. Don't think you can scare me. I'm still an officer. You—" Naomi ignored him. She suddenly released her grip. Grady's body slid off the shelf, his back brushing through the fallen boxes with a clatter. He staggered, struggling to straighten his posture. He coughed dryly, eyes darting around, embarrassed by a few curious glances, trying not to laugh. Naomi stepped back one pace, returning to calm as if she had never pinned someone against a wall with just a wrist lock. She held the handbag strap and gave Grady one last look, not as prey, but as a creditor waiting for the debt to come due. Her voice was loud enough for him to hear clearly, but soft enough for bystanders to think it was a warning between two people. "You dug your own grave. I'm right here watching you bury yourself." Grady licked his lips, stepped back 2 paces, adjusted his collar, trying to put on the face of a model officer, but his hands were still sweaty, clutching his gun holster. Naomi turned her back, leaving him to swallow his humiliation alone amid the brightly lit vitamin shelves, beginning a counter-hunt no one dared predict the ending of. Grady tilted his shoulder, pretending to squeeze past Naomi at the far end of the supplement shelf. He clicked his tongue, eyes darting quickly to the ceiling camera, a blind spot just right so the lens wouldn't fully capture the moment he subtly pushed a pack of supplements into the slightly open edge of Naomi's handbag, a clean trap with no fingerprints because he had already been wearing thin skin-colored gloves. As soon as Naomi turned her back to check another vitamin box, Grady set his script in motion. He bent down, pretending to pick up the pack from near her heel, his hoarse voice raised like a fire alarm. "Hey, this lady is shoplifting." His voice echoed through the narrow aisle, spilling directly into the adjacent produce section. A few heads with baseball caps of housewives snapped up. A young woman pushing a cart full of milk stopped completely, eyes fixed on Grady, then flicked over to a woman in a nurse's uniform, her face bare of makeup but sharp. Naomi stood still. Her hand gently set the vitamin box down on the shelf, a light motion, as if unrelated to the shouting that had turned the whole supermarket into a small stage. Her gaze locked on Grady, a silent stare, as solid as a rock, without a trace of the shame he expected. A security guard in a blue shirt with the supermarket logo hurried over, still holding a stack of receipts he hadn't turned in at the checkout. Seeing Grady's badge peeking from his collar, he immediately slumped his shoulders and asked obediently, "What's going on, officer?" Grady cupped his hands, holding the pack high so both the guard and several phones set to record could see clearly. "Look, stashing items without paying at the checkout. This type sells for several tens of dollars, not cheap." Whispers erupted like footsteps sliding on a floor. An older bald man pushing a shopping cart tiptoed to peek over another's shoulder. "Her? Good grief, she looks decent enough." A young mother pulled her son close behind her back, whispering sharply, "Don't get near. Petty thief, don't look." Naomi remained silent. She just lightly shifted the strap on her shoulder. Her eyes slid from the pack to Grady's hand and then back up to his nose bridge. Her face showed no redness, her breathing steady, neck muscles only twitching slightly as she swallowed back a laugh of disdain. Grady took advantage. His voice shot out, sweeping every gaze. "This lady, I'm writing the report right here. Call the manager. This supermarket doesn't tolerate fraud or theft. Everyone bear witness for me. The security guard swallowed hard, fumbling to open his notebook, flipping to the standard report page, eyes still glancing at Naomi. He had seen her face at least 2 or 3 times, usually in hospital corridors or emergency entrances, when Naomi Carter led the paramedic security team through the emergency exit. But today, facing the badge Grady pressed close to his lapel, he dared not ask anything. Only Naomi stood in the cramped aisle, air conditioning breeze brushing loose strands of hair against her shoulder. She took a slow breath, eyes fixed on Grady, as if peeling away the mask of sweat dripping down his temples. A few young people clustered behind, phone screens flashing, cameras focusing on the pack lying limp in Grady's hand, then sweeping to Naomi's face. Motionless, no defense, no pleading. Someone clicked their tongue. Isn't she scared? Usually people cry and beg. Naomi's pupils contracted slightly, just enough for an exclamation mark to hiss inside her mind. So, you're playing that game, Miller? Fine. Let me see who ends up tied down. Grady squeezed the supplement pack, raising it like a prized trophy, his voice booming down the crowded aisle like thunder. Everyone, bear witness. I am Officer Miller, caught her red hand. This supermarket will set an example for those trying to evade the law. His voice shattered into a cold echo, spreading over the spice counter and stretching across the powdered milk shelves nearby. An older man with gray hair carrying a bag of carrots weaved through the crowd, stepping close to Naomi. He frowned, glanced at the pack, then looked deeply into her eyes still calm, like a windless lake. He quietly asked, not threatening, but with the weary doubt of one familiar with society's lies, "Miss, is this true? I heard nurses don't steal such petty things." Naomi shrugged her shoulders, exhaling briefly. She neither denied nor explained. Her black eyes reflected the white LED lights on the ceiling before settling straight into the man's gaze. A sharp question cut through all half-hearted judgments. Do you believe what you just saw, or your own eyes? The man stepped back half a pace. On one side was Grady's booming military drum of a voice, on the other was the unwavering eyes of a dark-skinned woman. He lowered his face, avoiding that gaze, offering no reply. The supermarket guard, still holding the report notebook, swallowed dry, then cautiously drew out a pen. He looked at Grady for the signal. Grady nodded and flicked his chin, adding a few threatening beats. Don't waste time. Write it all down here so the manager and local police can't accuse me of bias. Clearly state, evidence found in the bag. Offender's name, Naomi Carter. Her name slipped from Grady's clenched teeth like a stone dropping deep into a well. Naomi showed no reaction. Only the collar of her uniform trembled slightly as she took a long breath, bracing herself to keep from breathing out a trembling sound. The guard bit his lip, eyes meeting Naomi's for a moment before dropping down. He held the notebook, trembling as he wrote the first line. Report of theft, violation at the supermarket. Grady bent forward, pressing the report close to Naomi's hand, his other hand gripping her wrist, forcing her to sign. He leaned close to her ear, breath mixing the smell of cheap coffee and stale cigarettes, exhaling like a dead rat's stench. Sign it, or I'll drag you into the van. Your choice, Carter. The entire aisle fell silent. Not out of sympathy, the crowd began to split into 2 groups. One whispered, "Poor thing, she looks so bright." The other giggled, phones raised, cameras zooming in on Naomi's face, forced down onto the paper. Naomi lowered her eyelids, watching the shaking pen in her hand. A faint laugh escaped her lips, soft as a latch clicking open. She sighed, her eyes drifting across the supermarket ceiling where another red blinking eye, the security camera, silently recorded everything. She said not a word of nonsense, only telling herself inside, "Enjoy it, Miller. It's all being recorded for me." Grady glared, voice rough. "I'm out of patience. Tie her hands. Take this one to the monitoring room." The guard's face paled, but his hands still obeyed. The sound of Grady twisting Naomi's arm behind her back cracked sharply. A clean, cold snap cutting through the white-lit corridor, ready to push this small-town Noon into a storm of justice Grady never expected. Grady kept his voice soft, as if lulling her. "Cooperate, don't make me get rough and embarrass both of us." As soon as he finished, his expression turned icy cold. He grabbed Naomi's wrist, twisting it behind her back. The sharp crack of her joints made a nearby cashier gasp and drop a roll of receipts onto the floor. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was harsh, metal biting cold into bare flesh, leaving a red mark instantly under the supermarket's bright daytime lights. A young mother carrying shopping bags and holding her 5-year-old son immediately pulled him to the opposite side of the shelf, murmuring, "Walk quickly, son," avoiding Naomi's eyes like fire. At checkout lane number 3, a thin employee still holding some receipts froze in place, eyes following the nurse's cuffed wrist, but lips remained stiff, silent. Grady glared at anyone lingering nearby, then spat out sharply, "Anyone want to testify? Or does anyone else want to help a thief?" No one dared answer. A natural space formed around him and Naomi, as if they were a filthy stain amid the supermarket's gleaming lights and freshly polished tiles. Naomi didn't cry out or struggle. Her whole body stood straight like an iron pillar. Only her shoulders, locked and pulled back, made her look helpless at first glance. Yet at that moment she turned her head and looked directly into Grady's eyes without blinking or trembling. Her eyes were black, deep and silent, like water hiding a sharp blade. Grady gritted his teeth, thinking he had broken his prey, but a sudden chill ran down his spine as he realized she was not afraid at all. In fact, that look was mocking him in front of the crowd. Naomi turned her face, scanning the heads leaning over the shelves, catching every evasive glance and every pair of lips tightly sealed, swallowing questions. That look carried a silent message. Watch closely. See who the real culprit is. A statement unspoken, but crystal clear in every listener's throat. Grady jerked his chin, his other hand gripping the gun holster at his side tightly, dragging Naomi through the main aisle toward the staff area and surveillance room. The steady tapping of police shoes on tile echoed sharply in a space suddenly silenced to promotional music. Footprints and handcuff marks cut deep into the sweltering noon of a town thought to be familiar with justice only in name. And Naomi, wrapped in a chain of metal around her wrists, stood tall as if she were the one leading Grady, not the other way around. Grady pulled Naomi through the gap between checkout lanes, his voice barking as if putting on a show for the crowd. "Open the security room now. I'll handle this one quickly. No time for lengthy checks." A female manager looked up in surprise from a pile of documents. Her eyes met Naomi's for just a second, but it was enough to freeze her. White blouse, dangling name tag, and calm, still expression. She immediately recognized the woman who had worked with security during the missing patient case last year. Naomi was the one who helped them avoid a prolonged scandal. Yet facing Grady's growling glare, the manager stammered, "Yes," then stepped back, signaling the assistant security guard to open the door. Grady didn't look at her once. He focused on tightening his grip on Naomi's elbow, pulling hard so her cuffed wrist jerked behind her back, making the skin under her uniform collar flush red. Naomi still did not resist, even walking straight, her feet touching the tiles without a rushed sound. With every step he dragged her, she let the metal handcuffs gently clang against her loose hair, like the chain was just a temporary accessory. An 8-year-old child, clutching a bag of potato chips, tugged at his mother's shirt, eyes wide as he stared at Naomi from head to toe. He whispered, "Mom, is the nurse being arrested? Did she really steal, Mom?" The mother quickly covered his mouth, pulling him close behind the bread counter, her eyes filled with confusion and embarrassment. At checkout lane number 5, a group of young employees whispered among themselves. A girl wearing a morning shift cap lowered her voice. "She works at a big hospital. I even saw her when I went for a checkup. Why would she suddenly steal?" The boy beside her shook his head. "Look at her face. Does she look scared? It's creepy." But then all lowered their eyes, none daring to speak aloud in front of the authority wearing a badge, dragging that woman like a petty thief. Naomi kept her posture straight, head upright. Her eyes blinked once, then she smiled faintly, a pale smile like the hot wind outside the parking lot, but sharp like a knife cutting velvet. That smile was not for Grady, who was gritting his teeth, enjoying humiliating her in front of the crowd. It was for the eyes secretly watching her from behind the shelves. Some shocked looks, some questions beginning to sprout in the minds of those who thought they were safe. Over Grady's shoulder, Naomi looked directly at a young grocery employee secretly filming with her phone. Her lips moved slightly as if to say, "Keep watching, don't look away." No one heard the words aloud, but the pressed lips and calm gaze were enough to engrave the message into anyone's memory who had just witnessed it. Grady pushed open the security room door, slammed it shut, locking the two of them inside with confidence that he controlled the game. He had no idea that at that moment the chessboard he had set up to humiliate Naomi was tightening around his own neck little by little. What he thought was a preemptive strike was actually the first brick Naomi quietly placed in position, preparing for an irreversible counterattack. Outside, eyes both fearful and doubtful silently changed roles, from mere spectators to witnesses of a truth about to explode. The sound of the security room door latch clicking shut was dry and sharp. Grady chuckled inwardly, thinking he had won, but Naomi, despite her handcuffed hands, left a second smile on her reddened face, marked by the metal's tight grip, a smile meant for him, signaling the beginning of uncovering all the filth he hid beneath that uniform. Everything, just as her eyes said earlier, was only beginning. Min left the surveillance room after nearly 1 hour of inspecting the shipment with barcode errors. He had intended only to head to the main checkout counter to ask for additional delivery documents, his mind still muttering warehouse numbers. Yet before his feet could touch the shiny tiled floor, Min froze in front of the soda aisle. At cashier number 3, a crowd was jostling, everyone whispering and glancing toward the same spot. A woman wearing a nurse's uniform, her hair tied up, collar slightly askew, with both wrists handcuffed behind her back. The voice of Officer Grady Miller was unmistakable. He growled sharply, his words sliding through clenched teeth, attempting to maintain an authoritative tone while berating the woman, his voice dripping with triumph. Min frowned slightly, his hand unconsciously crumpling the warehouse receipt. He weaved through a couple whispering nearby, the crowd parting like water to reveal Grady pressing firmly on the woman's shoulder, forcing her to bow her head to the piece of paper he held up. But the woman did not lower her head. Her neck was straight, her face lifted. Despite the dried blood staining her wrist, her eyes were calm and steady, like a rock in a raging stream. It took Min a moment to recognize that familiar jawline, that straight nose, and the way she sat silently, challenging all attacks of words and judgment. A sudden thought escaped him quietly. Sister Naomi. Years of night shifts, cleaning and monitoring hospital cameras had shown Min all kinds of dirty business. Petty theft by security guards or rookie nurses stealing supplies. Only one person, a figure in a white coat who once knocked on the security room door at 3 a.m., handed Min a hot paper cup of coffee and directly told the hospital director, "He is innocent. I will take responsibility for the investigation." That person was Naomi, the hospital's security chief, the only superior who ever called him by his real name instead of the nickname Night Shift Guy everyone else used. And now, before Min's eyes, that same woman was handcuffed in broad daylight, surrounded by whispers and the faint smell of disinfectant spray lingering on the floor. Grady glanced up and caught Min's eyes, but only smirked. A mocking greeting. Min immediately understood. Grady was not afraid. He knew who Min was and believed Min would not dare intervene. A bitter lump rose in Min's throat. He stepped forward half a pace, scanning quickly. A package of tonic pills lay on the floor near the counter, and Grady's shiny black shoes blocked the exact spot where Naomi had just been dragged. Everything was arranged too neatly, far too neatly, for the sloppy nature Min had heard about Grady. He drew a sharp breath, gripping the warehouse receipt so tightly that its edges tore. The faulty shipment numbers were now just a flimsy excuse covering his racing heartbeat. The same old trick, Min muttered quietly to himself. He recalled the story from 7 years ago. A novice nurse was accused of stealing painkiller bags to sell illegally and was fired, but the evidence had been tampered with and the cameras had been conveniently broken. Naomi had been the one to retrieve data from the backup server, exposing the entire trap. A chill ran down Min's spine as he watched Grady force Naomi's shoulder down again. The metal handcuffs clanged sharply against the counter like a hammer delivering judgment. Min knew clearly that if he stood still, Naomi would have no defender in this supermarket. But if he spoke up now, Grady would find a way to silence him, just like he had silenced other curious bystanders before. Min hissed something through clenched teeth, unclear whether it was a curse at Grady or a rebuke to himself. This time, she won't bear it alone. He turned sharply and strode back to the surveillance room, clutching the crumpled receipt and carrying a resolve as hard as steel to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Pressing his back against a shelf to avoid Grady's gaze, his hand still squeezing the torn receipt that now held no meaning, Min noticed a young auxiliary guard near the surveillance room door, wearing a cheap radio earpiece and darting his eyes nervously like a mouse caught by a cat. Min grabbed the guard's shoulder and pulled him into a corner, his voice low but firm, each word deliberate. "Who allowed you to handcuff her? Was there a search warrant? Don't you see something wrong?" The young guard immediately shrugged, swallowed dryly, blinking rapidly. "Mr. Grady told us to do as he said. Who would dare refuse, Mr. Min? I'm new. If he holds a grudge..." His voice trailed off as his eyes dropped, gripping the radio strap like a lifeline. Min took a deep breath, chest rising, then falling, swallowing the frustration jumping wildly in his throat. He knew the rules here. The moment he so much as stirred, Grady would spin a story that Min was obstructing the investigation, get him removed from duty, or even drag higher management into forcing an apology. Min had seen it happen before, time and again, all black as ink. "Fine, step aside. I'll handle it myself." Min's voice was hoarse as he pushed the guard back toward the security counter, then turned and strode quickly away. A curse hissed inside his head that, if spoken aloud, would tear apart the bleach-scented surveillance room. The surveillance room door clicked sharply behind him, like the edge of a blade. Min dropped into his chair, pulled out the key to the storage cabinet, and took out a backup hard drive only accessible to senior security staff. The camera feed from the pharmacy lobby appeared, and Min rewound the footage second by second. And then he saw it clearly. Naomi bends down to pick a box of medicine from the low shelf. Grady steps close, pretending to tug lightly on the handbag strap while slipping the tonic pills into a pocket. The footage was black and white, but Min did not need color. Naomi's eyes as she turned back, Grady stepping back 3 paces like a predator releasing bait, all contained in a still frame. Min wanted to smash. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply through clenched teeth. His index finger tapped rhythmically on the desk like a drum, signaling an incoming storm from Grady. "Sister, Naomi, this time I won't let you suffer humiliation alone anymore," he murmured, words meant to brace the courage he was about to use to strangle the man who planted false evidence. Min stretched forward, grabbed the hard drive, and pressed save to copy the clip into an urgent folder. The transfer was slow, but the determination racing in his mind burst out of the cramped room. He quickly scrolled through his contacts to find Lawyer Huang, the lawyer who had helped Naomi win an internal security case years ago. After just 3 rings, the familiar deep voice answered. "Min?" Min cut straight to the point. "Mr. Huang, I'm sending you the clip. Grady Miller is staging a setup to frame Sister Naomi. Keep this copy ready to take to the authorities in court at any time. I have the original." "Understood. Stay calm. Don't let him know you're involved." Huang's voice was firm as a nail. Min hung up and typed the last command, "Send backup." A status line appeared, "Transfer complete." He leaned back, rubbed his forehead, and cold sweat dripped along his hairline. In the hallway, Grady still growled like a superior, but inside this tiny surveillance room, a trap had been laid out. Neat as the way Grady had once baited the white coat of a woman who never knew how to bow her head. And Min, the security manager, who seemed to only scan inventory, had turned himself into the first link, pulling the tangled string that bound the man who sowed humiliation in broad daylight. The surveillance room was cramped, its old fluorescent lights casting mottled glows on the walls, but the light illuminating Min's face came directly from the computer screen. He sat curled up on a rickety wooden chair, the portable hard drive resting beside the mouse, its cable dangling like a lifeline, pumping truth into every cell of his brain. Outside in the hallway, the speakers crackled with a disjointed, piercing advertisement for powdered milk for children. Powdered milk for children, for the children. Min took a deep breath and ran his fingers over the video's scrub bar. He had watched this clip 3 times already, but still lacked the courage to believe it was real. The screen showed a familiar scene. The pharmacy counter, Naomi in her nurse's uniform, her shoulder slightly tilted, eyes darting over the shelves. Behind her, Grady lurked like an armored shadow. He stopped his hand, rewound a few seconds, eyes straining to catch every frame. The faint clicking of the mouse sounded like the cocking of a gun in Min's mind. He held his breath, a light brush of shoulders. Naomi turned her face away before she could react. Grady's hand was already swift, pulling a packet of tonic from his uniform sleeve, a smooth snatch that took less than 2 seconds. Chills ran down Min's spine as his eyes fixed on the enlarged corner of the frame. Grady's face appeared clearly, each detail sharp, the slight curl of his lips, the gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. Min hit pause, the cursor freezing on that frame. Grady had stabbed himself in the back, without anyone else's help. Min knew that showing this clip in front of all the shoppers would cause Grady to collapse like a sandcastle in a heavy rain. Yet at the same time, Min understood better than anyone that if this tape surfaced too soon, he would be the next scapegoat. He leaned his elbows on the table, rubbing his cold hands hard across his forehead. Sweat dripped down his temples. In this town, a supermarket security guard like him was nothing compared to the police badge Grady wore on his chest. Min's disappearance would cost Grady less than half a day and a few false statements. Min stared at the frozen frame on the screen. Naomi stood there, the black woman with unyielding eyes. He barely knew her, just exchanged a few words when she inspected outsourced security equipment for the hospital. But those eyes now seemed to look through the camera lens, forcing Min to choose between standing for what is right or burying his head in the sand like those who foolishly thought themselves clever outside. He inhaled deeply, his hand still trembling but moving back to the mouse. The cursor slid slowly, painfully, like a dull blade cutting through his guts. He clicked export, selected the format. The CPU fan groaned behind him. The hard drive's LED blinked blue and red. Each blink was a slash into Min's path to survival. Leaning back, his eyes never leaving the frame of Grady's mocking smile, Min's mind played out parallel scenes like a film reel. Grady discovering him, blocking him in the parking lot, breaking his arm as he did Naomi's, or worse, staging a security guard colluding to steal scenario to pin everything on him. He closed his eyes, breath uneven, palms sweating but fingers clenched tight. A thought broke free inside, voiceless yet driven straight into his will. Truth is only worth anything when it's revealed at the right time. Min opened his eyes and clicked to confirm, saving the final copy. The file appeared on screen, bang_Grady_VUOANMP4. At the bottom of the screen, the clock read 13:22 in the afternoon. But to Min, this midday had stretched like a lifetime, sitting on the razor's edge between life and death. He lowered his gaze from the screen, sweat running down his temples to his ear, soaking the collar of his shift uniform. He breathed slowly. The heat from the CPU case did not make him tremble as much as the fiery heat burning inside his lungs. The feeling, for the first time in his life, of about to face what people whispered was the iron wall of this town. He pulled open the small drawer under the surveillance desk, rummaging through messy papers to find an old 32 GB USB, its plastic plug scratched and worn. He gripped it tightly, like holding his last survival knife. Min plugged it into the USB port beside the screen, eyes flicking quickly to the status line. Copying file 1 of 1. The progress bar moved agonizingly slow, each percent cutting nerve endings at his shoulders. While waiting for the file, he flipped open the inventory ledger, a perfect disguise for the digital trap. The folder containing the clip was renamed just below the summary line, Inventory Q2. Min typed in the password, a number sequence known only to him and Lawyer Huang. He muttered while typing, "If you dig this out, Grady, I'll haunt you to the grave." The copy completion beep rang like a bell, drowning out the discount announcements in the lobby. Min pulled out the USB, stared at it for exactly 3 seconds, then shoved it deep into his inner shirt pocket. Lining the edge of the worn pocket with a stiff cloth, he concealed the USB's tip. He zipped up, his hand still shaking but his eyes burning red like a cornered, skinny dog. Even if he fell, he would bite back hard enough to draw blood. He slipped out his personal safe under the desk, struggled to open the rusty lock, and dropped another USB app, a decoy backup file, into a corner. On top of it, he placed a roll of printed monthly reports and covered everything with a cloth used to clean the cameras. This life-or-death item was stored in the one place least likely to be touched, the safe of a night shift security guard. His phone vibrated fiercely in his pocket. Min jumped, pulled it out, and saw the caller ID, Lawyer Huang. He swiped to open the message. A brief line read, "File received. Secure key. Stay strong." Min pressed the phone tight to his chest, his heartbeat pounding like a war drum beneath his sternum. He glanced at the wall clock. The second hand moved silently, giving no warning of when it might strike down on his neck. Min inhaled deeply. The smell of sweat on his collar hit his nose, pungent but strangely sharpening his mind. He told himself, almost gritting his teeth, "I have only one task left. Don't die before the truth comes out." The computer screen had returned to standby, faintly reflecting the thin but upright figure of Min. He switched off the surveillance room light, gripped his keychain tightly, then cracked the door open slightly, scanning the hallway. The outdoor camera hung high, its red light blinking, proof that anyone wanting to erase this cut would have to pass both human and machine eyes. He stepped out, locked the door, and pocketed the key. The night shift guard trudged back into the dim corridor, blending into the rush of footsteps. But in his eyes, Grady's shadow was no longer an iron wall. It was an old beast, about to shed its beautiful skin. Min bowed his head, muttering quietly as a blessing for himself. Time for the trap to close. Min closed the surveillance room door, turned the lock gently once, then leaned his back against the cold door. He could clearly hear through the wall Grady yelling mixed with Naomi's concise replies, sharp like stones thrown into a well. That sound sent chills down Min's spine. It was not panic, but a sound that could drag an entire pack of wild dogs into the open if anyone dared to threaten the life of that woman. Min pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolling to find a familiar name. Thu Internal Medicine Department. The number was still in the same place. Last year, Naomi had insisted he save it because sometimes she needed advice on hospital system security. He bit his lower lip lightly, took a deep breath, then pressed the call button. No signal. He clicked his tongue and started typing a message. "She needs the sun." The message was only 6 words, but more precise than any alarm siren. Sent. Less than 10 seconds later, the screen lit up. On the way. Min exhaled, his hand holding the phone, still sweaty and slippery, like a fish wriggling in a basin of blood. He glanced around the surveillance room. The camera system showed 4 corners of the supermarket. The hallway frame was still bright with a red blinking indicator. Grady was skilled, but not skilled enough to cut off all the cameras. Min crouched down, opened the backup tab, and entered the internal password only the security team leader knew. An automatic backup file appeared on the D drive, running silently like a hidden current about to break through the concrete foundation of trust everyone feared to touch. Footsteps in the hallway snapped Min back to reality. He held his breath, eyes fixed on the screen, ears sharp like a field mouse hearing a hawk's swoop. but it was only Dewey, the morning shift guard, holding a radio, looking innocent. Min opened the door slightly and whispered urgently, "Watch the hallway cameras. Don't take your eyes off. If you see Grady leading a stranger, report to me immediately. Keep your mouth shut about this. Got it?" Dew swallowed dryly and murmured, "I know, Min. I'm not stupid." Before he could finish, Min pushed the door gently shut, cutting off the thread of worry like severing a nerve. Min sank into his chair, reinserted the USB, his mouse pointer trembling with his heartbeat. He knew well that with a single slip, Grady would grab him and drag him straight behind the patrol car, accusing him of aiding and destroying evidence as easily as snapping his fingers to wipe off sweat. But Naomi's hands were still tied like a petty thief, something Min could never accept. He clenched his teeth and pressed the next call. Lawyer Huang. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar male voice came through the speaker. "Hello, Min? What's the emergency?" Min controlled his tone, his breath close to the mic. "Brother Huang, we need backup here immediately. There's evidence, witnesses. Grady won't be able to swallow this case." On the other end, Huang wasted no time, replying simply, "Hold the person tight. Hold the file tight. I'm on my way." The call ended. Min set the phone down, watching his own hands tremble on the glass desk, reflecting the screen's light. Outside, the supermarket's atmosphere began to fill with whispers of rumors. Housewives stopped bargaining over cucumbers and whispered about the nurse caught stealing medicine. A motorbike driver hurriedly dialed into a cafe around the corner, joking, "Looks like we've got a free movie today." The tiny seed of news had started to spread, but Min knew clearly that once it reached the street, it would flow like spilled oil, burning the clean image Grady had carefully built for so long. He turned his back and looked at the camera screen again. In the frame, Naomi sat still, her wrists bruised red, but her eyes cold as carved stone. Min whispered to himself, quieter than a breath but sharp enough to pierce fear, "No one touches her as long as I'm breathing." Who stopped her car abruptly right at the supermarket entrance. The air conditioner's breeze from the car had yet to mix with the midday heat. The nurse wore a thin lab coat, her hair tied neatly, eyes sharp like a freshly sharpened blade. As soon as she passed through security, Thu scanned the reception desk, her voice firm like an order to shoot. "Where's Min? Where's Naomi?" A cashier new to the shift panicked and pointed towards the technical corridor. Min is in the surveillance room, and Naomi, she's been taken inside by the police." Thu didn't wait to hear the rest. She slipped through the long line of customers at the checkout counter, her soft-soled shoes tapping loudly on the tiles. But Thu no longer heard the familiar beeping of barcode scanners. The hallway leading to the surveillance room was dim, fluorescent lights flickering. Min was already waiting, his back against the wall, his bloodshot eyes tired but focused. When he saw Thu, he breathed out in relief and whispered quickly, "Grady is forcing a confession. I've got the footage. Huang is on his way." Thu nodded, took her phone from the lab coat pocket, scrolled quickly through contacts, and called the hospital's duty station. Her voice shifted from soft to sharp as a blade. "Hospital security team, listen up. I am Thu from internal medicine. Head nurse Naomi Carter is being detained unlawfully at the Green Mart supermarket. Urgently notify the hospital legal department and prepare an official request for immediate release. No one stays silent." She hung up before the other end could respond. Min shook as he opened the crossbody bag and pulled out the black USB, stained with fingerprints and the sweat he had been sweating for the past half hour. He said nothing, just handed it to Thu. She pinched it between 2 fingers and slid it neatly into her lab coat pocket, the USB head hidden behind the white fabric like a blood vessel concealed beneath the skin. Thu looked up at Min, lowering her voice to only be heard by the 2 of them. "You did well. Now lock Grady in there. Don't let him get into the hallway. Lawyer Huang is almost here. If he runs, everything's lost." Min nodded firmly, patted Thu's shoulder as encouragement, then quickly slipped back to the surveillance room door. Outside, in the promotional goods section, housewives had begun to gather and whisper. A student held a phone hidden behind a cereal box, covertly filming the hallway. A new message immediately appeared in the dorm group chat. Green Mart supermarket kidnapped a nurse, corrupt police, along with a shaky 15-second video showing Grady's badge peeking through a door crack. The screech of a car braking came from the parking lot. Lawyer Huang stepped out of a black sedan, white shirt sleeves neatly rolled up, clutching a file tightly under his arm. He walked straight through the automatic door without greeting anyone, not even letting the guard check his papers. Meeting Min right before the surveillance room, Huang barked, "Hold the door. Don't let him show his face. I'm going in now." Min blocked the door handle, locking it again as if afraid it would swing open on its own. He glanced at the hallway camera, the red light blinking steadily like his own heart, anxious but steady. Thu bent down and quickly sent a single message to Naomi. "Stay silent. You are protected." The phone confirmed sent. Thu squeezed her wrist hard to calm her pounding heart. Inside, Grady had no idea that just a few steps outside that iron door, the entire security network for Naomi had already sealed tight. The surveillance room, where he had confidently held his prey, had now turned into a cage, trembling with fear. A pincer move had closed in tightly enough that by the time he realized it, the escape door was locked. Outside, public opinion had already tasted blood from the first video, quietly spreading on social media. Grady had no clue that the knife he had sharpened for others was about to stab him in the back in broad daylight. The surveillance room door swung open for the third time in less than an hour, but this time the person stepping in was not a guard or a frightened employee. It was Hoang, the name linked to several cases toppling officials in this city. His eyes swept across the room like scissors, cutting away the polite facade that had lingered around Grady for so long. Wang closed the door, placing a thick file on the table. The sound of the hard cover hitting the surface was crisp and decisive, louder than Grady's labored breathing up to that point. Min and Thu stood on either side with arms crossed, like iron bolts sealing the only escape route Grady still believed he had. Wang leisurely unlocked the file, pulling out a stack of yellowed papers stamped with a glaring red seal in the upper corner. This seal had once been used to lock everything away in the disciplinary office drawer. Now it lay exposed here under the flickering fluorescent light, right when the person who needed to see it most was trying to hide his face. Wang flipped to the first page, his voice steady and loud enough for Thu, Min, and Naomi to hear. Grady Miller, lawsuit from year X. Plaintiff Nguyen Van K, immigrant worker. Charges: abuse of power, unlawful detention, coercion to give false testimony. Min gripped Grady's shoulder tightly. Grady's body was as stiff as stone, but beneath his uniform, sweat soaked down to the waistband of his pants. Thu shifted slightly, stepping close to block the door. Grady knew if he tried to run, the handcuffs waited just outside. He twisted his neck and hissed through clenched teeth. "I was cleared. My superiors signed off on my innocence. Stop fabricating." Grady's voice cracked, no longer as forceful as when he had screamed at Naomi to sign the confession. Hoang didn't look at him, but flicked to the second page. The rustling paper sounded like a whip crack. He tapped a finger on a red-lined passage. Investigation conclusion that year. Insufficient evidence because witness number 1 disappeared. Witness number 2 withdrew the complaint due to family pressure. "Want me to read their names, Grady?" The room's atmosphere thickened suddenly. Outside, the supermarket speakers switched music tracks to a shrill children's tune, mixed with the humming air conditioner, making the veins on Grady's forehead throb wildly. Naomi, who had sat silently in a corner the whole time, wrists still marked with old cuffs, slowly scanned the file and fixed her gaze on Grady's face, as if nailing a fly to a wall. Her lips curled faintly, but cold as a dried well. "So that's how it is. I will expose everything, right here, Grady." Grady opened his mouth, trying to twist words into false accusations, but Min pressed him back into the chair. His fingernails scraped the cheap leather, leaving white marks. Wang lifted his eyes to Grady for the first time without respect for any badge pinned to his chest. "Innocent men? Or did someone pin you with the model cop label while hiding all the filth under the table? Today I'm bringing everything out, not in the disciplinary office, but before the cameras of the very supermarket you thought you ruled." Naomi tightened her sore wrist and lowered her voice, emphasizing every word for all to hear. You cuffed me in front of everyone. Now I'm cuffing your rotten past right before their eyes. Fair and square, Grady. The old air conditioner wheezed once, then cut off completely. Inside the surveillance room, only Grady's ragged, panicked breaths remained. The sound of turning pages continued steadily, but each page Huang flipped was like a hammer blow to Grady's neck. Huang didn't need to raise his voice. The words he read were enough to strip away the model officer mask Grady had worn all these years in the district police department. Page 5. Testimony of witness number 2, Fame Tung, who vanished from the shelter 3 days before trial and was later found dead in a rented room, with a wrist cut ruled suicide. The victim's family filed appeals, but this file was stored along with yours, Grady. Huang read calmly, but hit every nerve in Grady's jawline. Grady lunged, jerking his arm free from Min's grip, swinging it as if to smash the open file. But Min was faster, his large hand pressing Grady's shoulder firmly into the chair, the force like a nail driven into rotten wood. Let go. You have no right. I was cleared. My superiors signed off on my innocence, Grady yelled, voice still loud but breath fading, collar damp, badge swinging wildly with desperate thrashing. Min said nothing, only squeezed his shoulder harder, as if reminding him, the day you twisted innocent hands, you spoke boldly. Today, I'm just as forceful. Thu stood nearby, pulling her phone from her lab coat pocket, opening the camera app, and calmly pointing it at Grady's face. Her grip was steady, her expression icy. Her thumb pressed the red record button, a light touch that made Grady's heart plummet like a stone falling into a shallow well. Hoyne didn't give him a chance to stop fearing. He flipped 3 more pages, each containing an enlarged photo, a forged crime scene report, a tampered forensic doctor's report, and a messy handwritten complaint withdrawal from witness number 1. Look closely, Grady. This copy is from the original file, not some altered version. Innocent men? Who's innocent? They won't save you this time. You think those cuffs are just for show? Huang tapped the file cover sharply. The dry knocking echoed like a judge's hammer. Naomi, who had leaned back all along, her hands stacked over old cuff marks, slowly stood and walked deliberately to the table, eyes not even looking at Grady, but scanning the file Huang held. She raised her hand and struck the wooden table edge with a sharp knock, sounding like a blade cutting through the air. Last time you got lucky hiding behind some papers. Not this time, Grady. I'm exposing everything, in front of everyone. And next, in court. A murmur spread down the hallway. The glass door of the surveillance room was crowded with unfamiliar faces. A child clutched his mother's shirt, eyes wide through the slightly open door. A delivery worker peeked in with a phone ready. The original clip, only 10 seconds long, had been uploaded to a local resident group chat titled Corrupt Cop Exposed, Hotter Than Street-Grilled Meat. Huang closed the file, running his finger down its spine, voice lowering but words still chilling. You've run out of places to hide, Grady. From today, this file will be read by many, not just me. Grady's shoulders slumped, giving up the struggle. His throat made a hoarse sound like a broken string, someone realizing the iron cage was locked from the inside by himself. Outside, the audience was ready to hear the sound of handcuffs clicking around the wrists of the man who once arrogantly called himself the law's representative. The supermarket security room was eerily silent, its white walls stained and blotchy, the metal door closing with the sound of a snapping trap. A camera hung from the corner of the ceiling, but its indicator light was off. Grady had taken care of it. He stood blocking the incoming light, his shadow stretching to the edge of the wooden table where Naomi sat opposite him. She was still in her nurse uniform, the collar slightly askew from the wrist twist at the cashier counter. Nearby, a young security guard in a perfectly creased uniform trembled, his eyes never daring to meet Naomi's, even for a second. Grady threw a stack of documents onto the table, the dry slap of paper against wood cutting the silence. but it was his eyes that truly suffocated the air. He pushed a pen forward, tapping each finger slowly, a fake smile spreading across his face. "Sign now, admit to stealing. Then I'll let you out gently. Otherwise," his voice hardened as his eyes flicked to the gun at his hip, "I'll charge you with resisting an officer. That's an easy charge to pin here." Naomi tilted her head, staring fixedly at the hand resting casually on the gun handle. The dried blood on her wrist still bore the imprint of the handcuffs. The pain sharp, but not enough to break her focus. She looked up and caught Grady's gaze, smiling, a smile that sent chills down his spine for reasons he couldn't understand. "Are you that confident?" Her voice was soft, like a casual remark about the weather. Grady slammed the table hard, sending the pen rolling off the edge and spinning on the tile floor before coming to a stop in the suffocating silence that followed. "Shut up. You have no other choice. Sign. Or more handcuffs, more hours locked up. No one will save you." Naomi glanced at the floor, slowly bending to pick up the pen. Her fingers flipped the pen over as if inspecting a harmless toy before placing it neatly back on the table. In her mind, every escape route had already connected like blood vessels. The hallway camera was still working, the security manager was definitely reviewing the original footage, and her private lawyer had been alerted. But none of that was ready to be revealed. She did not need a scene. Not yet. Her eyes dropped to the confession paper, reading it briefly before gently pushing it back toward Grady. Her tone was steady, neither loud nor soft. "You are sinking yourself deeper. My signature won't save you." Grady clenched his jaw, sweat shining on his forehead, but his voice remained threatening. He barked at the young guard standing close to the door. "Lock the outer door. Don't let this dog out until she signs. Lock it now." The heavy iron door slammed shut behind the guard, the bolt clicking sharply like a hammer sealing a death sentence. No way out remained. No immediate witnesses. Only Naomi was sitting there, shoulders straight, eyes calm, facing a police officer, beginning to lose control like a caged beast tied by the tail. And that beast had no idea the trap waiting for him just outside the thin wall. Grady blocked her way, his face just a breath away from Naomi's, the sharp smell of sweat and cheap deodorant rising harshly. He grabbed roughly at Naomi's collar, yanking her slightly forward, his voice grinding like metal on metal. "Who do you think you are? Don't forget your skin color. In this town, if I say you're guilty, you better kneel and confess." Naomi did not struggle, only her shoulders twitched slightly with his grip. Her gaze remained the same as when she was handcuffed at the cashier counter, deep, dark, and coldly patient. Her lips moved quietly, just loud enough for Grady to hear, dropping like a pebble on stone. "I already told you. You picked the wrong person." Grady hissed a curse through clenched teeth and roughly released her collar, snatched the pen still rolling at the table's edge, pressing it hard between Naomi's fingers. The pen tip left a faint dent on her skin. His eyes narrowed. "Sign! Sign right now! I'll let you go quietly or else—" He stopped speaking, his gaze flicking again to the gun at his hip, then resting on the red-tinged cuff marks on Naomi's wrist. Naomi looked at the pen, gripping it tightly like holding a small knife. She twisted it lightly, hearing the ink cartridge scrape inside, then suddenly raised her hand and swiped a short blue line across Grady's uniform sleeve, just beneath the crooked police badge on his shoulder. Grady roared and jerked back. "Are you crazy? Sign the paper, not me." He raised his hand to slap her, but Naomi had already set the pen down and exhaled softly, as if shaking off dust from a white coat. She tilted her head, her voice calm as if lecturing medical students. "You think turning off the camera solves everything. You forgot the guard outside has eyes. You forgot the hallway system has its own backup. Everything is recording your every growl, Miller. You'd better prepare your defense." Grady's chest heaved, his eyes fixed on the locked iron doorframe before scanning the ceiling corners as if searching for a hidden camera. His sweaty hand slipped down to his gun, fumbling like a man stripped of all his self-opined power. A quick, sharp jab, just enough to hit a vulnerable spot. Naomi didn't need to handcuff him. She only needed a few words to tear through the thin layer of false morality plastered over his uniform. Suddenly, the security room door rattled with 2 or 3 sharp knocks, piercing like needles. Grady jumped, retreating fully until his back hit the metal cabinet. A male voice called clearly, "Open up! I have orders to check camera data and the client's security guard under emergency provisions." The knocking continued, louder, impatient. Naomi gave a faint smile, just enough for Grady to see, but not enough for anyone else to understand who truly held the knife. She leaned slightly toward him, lowering her voice with cutting precision. "Too late, Miller. Are your hands still smelling of dirty cuffs?" Outside, keys rattled hurriedly and the bolt clicked open. The guard's trembling hand swung the door wide, stepping aside like a frightened rabbit separated from its pack. A middle-aged man in a gray suit entered, slamming a briefcase down on the table. His eyes swept over Naomi, then fixed sharply on Grady as if peeling his skin off. "How will you explain to the court the illegal detention of a senior medical staff member, along with signs of abuse of power?" Grady froze, no words left to push through his throat. His hand still shook on the gun handle, but now the weapon was as useless as a toy, unable to shoot through the blade of truth pressed firmly against his neck. The lawyer stood straight in the surveillance room, ignoring Grady's furious gaze, coldly pointing at the flat screen mounted in the corner of the wall. "Play the footage at the supplement counter, then open the hallway angle. I want to see every single frame, no fast-forwarding." His voice was not loud, but clear and forceful, pressing heavily on the thick tension in the air. The security manager, a young man who had once served under Naomi, clenched his teeth, nodded, and squeezed past Grady, who stood blocking the way. He swiped a key card and inserted it into the security slot. The screen booted up, displaying rows of video files arranged by date and time, like sharp needles ready to pierce a lie. Grady forced a smile, tilting his chin toward Naomi, his mouth twisted. "Those old cameras, they might have tape problems. Don't blame me if nothing shows up." But his voice was no longer smooth. A bead of sweat rolled down from his temple onto his uniform collar, soaking a patch of fabric already pungent with cheap deodorant. Outside the door, footsteps clicked. A woman carrying a bag, holding her curious son's hand, bent to peek through the slightly open door. Beside her, 2 or 3 supermarket employees also leaned in, eyes fixed on the now clear footage of the brightly lit supplement counter. Naomi stood leaning against the chair, arms folded neatly across her chest. She said nothing, looking only at Grady. Her gaze never left him for a single second, as if, even without cameras, she could cut him down with the truth shining from her dark pupils. The footage played in slow motion. Naomi stood with her back turned, bending to read a medicine label. Grady appeared from the left corner, stepping close, his right hand secretly pulling a small package from his shirt pocket, pressing it against Naomi's shoulder before sliding his hand into her slightly open handbag. Every movement was crystal clear, undeniable. Someone outside whispered quietly, but loud enough to slip through the cramped wall crack, "Oh my God, he's stuffing it into her bag." The murmurs spread like sparks landing on oil, heads crowding closer, some even raising phones to record the screen, but then thinking better of it and lowering them, eyes wide with shock fixed on the scene. Grady bit his lip, drew his chin back, and lightly tapped his fist on his thigh, but dared not make a sound. The lawyer glared at him like a rotten fish about to be gutted. "Anything left to say, Officer Miller? Or should I call for the original footage restoration team?" Grady struggled to gather his voice. "It might just be a misunderstanding. Maybe she pickpocketed me, and I tried to grab it back." A small but cold laugh rang out, not from the lawyer or the security manager, but from Naomi. She did not tilt her head or bare her teeth, only curling her lips slightly enough for those still sane to understand the storm had changed direction. She didn't need to defend herself, not a single word of justification. Instead, she lowered her hand, gently smoothed the wrinkle in her uniform collar where Grady had grabbed her, then stood straight, her eyes scanning Grady one last time, a look like an invisible hammer smashing every muscle in the jaw of the frozen police officer standing like a wooden statue. Whispers outside the door buzzed like rice fields in a sharp wind. She doesn't need to argue, the clip argues for her. A mother lifted her son into her arms, gently stroking his hair, eyes never leaving the screen, showing a dirty hand stripped bare by the merciless but fair lens. More truthful than any oath Grady had ever sworn on his chest. Inside the room, cold air from the old air conditioner blew straight onto Grady's neck, sending chills down his spine. But the true cold was not the temperature. It was the woman's eyes, standing a few steps away. Eyes as deep as a well, swallowing every excuse he was about to utter. The screen stayed bright, the footage flowing smoothly like a dull blade slicing through layers of truth Grady had painted over with years of falsehood. The security manager pressed the fast-forward button, his arm trembling slightly, but his eyes no longer avoiding. Everyone outside held their breath, hearing only the rhythmic creak of the old ventilation fan at the corner of the ceiling. The next segment replayed Grady blocking the checkout counter, his face ridiculously triumphant as he shouted, "Caught, Red Hand!" his hand gripping Naomi's arm tightly, pulling her into the aisle. Naomi's face in the clip neither struggled nor protested, only turning slightly to reveal a streak of light down her nose, her eyes staring directly into the security camera, as if daring anyone to believe the officer's slander. A soft click sounded down the hallway. The mother, holding her son, who had just raised his phone to capture Grady's scowling face, hunched, back curved like a condemned man, whispered sternly enough for the boy to hear. "Look closely, son. Even dirty cops have to kneel sometimes. Don't let anyone fool you with a uniform." The lawyer slammed a thick old file onto the table. Papers fanned out. The bold words "abuse of power complaint" printed clearly on the cover. His voice hissed through clenched teeth, each word like a nail driven into Grady's mind. "You are facing charges of abuse of power, unlawful detention, and evidence tampering, and I have the right to demand an immediate search warrant for your phone. Cameras don't lie, Miller." Grady shrugged, sweat gleaming on his neck. His mouth opened and closed several times, finally only managing a whispered stammer. "It's just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to." He babbled like a fizzing bubble in flat air, weak and useless. A supermarket employee near the door couldn't hold back and whispered to a colleague. "Thought he was tough. Turns out it's just petty theft, tricks." The whispers spread down the hallway, people nodding, their eyes shifting from fear to contempt. Naomi still said nothing. She walked slowly toward the surveillance table, glanced over the files, then bent to pick up a paper fallen by Grady's feet, the confession form he had forced her to sign earlier. She smoothed the corner and placed it neatly in front of him, her voice steady and sharp like the final lock clicking shut. "I have never needed to shout for anyone to believe me, Miller. The truth finds its own voice." Someone outside took another photo, capturing Grady's sweat-soaked face with the faded words "Protect and Serve" barely visible on his chest badge, bitter and rotten. The security room door was pushed wide open, warm air from the long hallway flooding in with the shadows of arriving inspector police officers. The leader flashed his badge, scanning the room before fixing his gaze on Grady, crouched there, face ashen as ash. Naomi's lawyer signaled the guard to lock the door again, keeping Grady seated and awaiting processing. The whispers outside exploded like a swarm of bees finding their flight path again. Justice needs no shouting, but once exposed, it bites off the rotten roots. Naomi stepped back, took a deep breath, feeling the invisible handcuffs fall from her wrist, heavier 1,000 times than the metal ones Grady had slapped on her at the checkout. And beyond the wide-open door, the sun still shone down the endless hallway, illuminating a man bowed in defeat with nowhere left to run. Grady sat slumped by the edge of the table, his back pressed against the yellowed white wall, eyes wide and staring blankly at the security monitor now showing only a flashing security logo. His lips moved slightly, but in this room, now more crowded than when Naomi was locked up, no one listened to him like before. His police collar was askew, his badge hanging loose, and his shirt collar wrinkled like a dust rag. Naomi stood before him, not needing to take a single step closer, her shoulders straight like a military commander's back. The bruises on her swollen wrist were no longer pitied or feared, because her gaze forced every bowed head down. A fresh security guard, his uniform still crisp with creases, entered and froze upon seeing Grady. He was the old superior who had trained the entire night market patrol team. The guard's eyes hesitated, caught between respect for a former commanding officer and fear of the truth now revealed. Grady tried to lift himself off the floor. Knees shaking, hands gripping the table edge, he hissed through clenched teeth, voice distorted. I was set up. I have reasons. I was investigating her. His last words cut off as Naomi's eyes dropped on him like an iron hook pulling from his throat deep inside. The security manager glanced quickly at Naomi. The room held its breath, the only sound the creaking of the ceiling fan. Naomi said nothing, did not lower her voice to command. She nodded. A small nod, like a period ending the chapter for the hunting dog who thought he was the hunter. The manager reached into his guard belt and pulled out a shining pair of steel handcuffs, the very kind Grady once snapped coldly onto Naomi's wrist at the checkout, witnessed by both fear and satisfaction. Grady sprang up, voice breaking into a hoarse, cracked shout. "No, don't put those on me. I'm an officer. I still have rights." He spun toward Naomi, hands spread wide and pleading in threat. "You think you can?" Naomi stepped forward, just enough to cast her shadow over him. She stood very close. No need to point fingers, raise fists, or shout. Her voice dropped thin and clear, cold enough to sting. "Put these cuffs on your wrists, Miller. It suits you better." The room seemed to collapse under a layer of tension. The security staff and a few standing outside the glass door blinked rapidly, afraid to miss the moment justice, embodied by a woman with a swollen wrist, flipped the game. The manager bent his arms, gripping Grady's wrists tightly. The sharp click of the lock echoed coldly and loudly, unstoppable. Grady thrashed, gasping, spitting at the door. "I'm innocent. I'll sue you all. But his voice was drowned by a flood of phones raised. Camera flashes exploded, and some young voices hissed, "Film it. This clip's worth sharing, not that clip of Officer Carter's cuffs." Naomi did not spare him another glance. She turned, her back blocking the shame spreading across the tiled surveillance room floor. The automatic door in the hallway opened on its sensor, sunlight pouring through her hair. Only a chained hunting beast remained inside, beneath 100 looks both scornful and light, as if erasing the power he once abused. The handcuffs locking Grady's wrist clicked a second time. That sound echoed within the four walls, chilling because this time they locked not onto Naomi's skin, but firmly on the wrist of a man who once sneered while locking others up. Grady gave a harsh rasp, his face twisted, eyes darting for allies, but meeting only downcast, evasive stares, avoiding responsibility. He thrashed like a fish caught in a net, kicking hard against the edge of the surveillance table, scattering papers everywhere. Grady's broken breaths turned into half-shouts, half-pleas. "Don't, please don't. I'm an officer. I've been framed. I'll sue everyone. You don't have the right." A voice, cold as steel, cut across the table. The internal affairs inspector, small in stature but shoulders as solid as iron, didn't bother to meet Grady's eyes. He just tilted his head and ordered decisively, "Silence. You are being held for internal investigation. All resistance is recorded, and we'll add charges if you act out." Grady opened his mouth, his protest stuck in his dry throat. He still tried to wave his hands, but his wrists were firmly cuffed behind his back, veins bulging under pale skin. Any pride once shown beneath that badge, now swollen and bare, could no longer hide anything. Naomi stood slightly to the right, her long shadow stretching across the cold tiles, blocking the hallway light at the door. She looked at Grady, not with pity nor to further insult. Her eyes flicked down to the crooked badge on his chest, now worth no more than a wrinkled cleaning cloth. The corner of Naomi's mouth curled slightly, her voice barely a breath but colder than ice. "That won't save you." She did not touch him, did not raise a hand, nor shout. Everyone who laughed when she was cuffed now bowed their heads to watch Grady kneel, wrapping himself in the very chains he once wielded to threaten others. The lawyer stepped forward, tapping a file on the table, nodding at the supermarket manager before exchanging quick words with the inspector. Their talk no longer concerned Grady, but the procedure, records, investigation, transferring files, and indictment. Each word is like a hammer sealing the coffin of an abuse of power once thought untouchable. A few people outside stopped filming, returning to the checkout, lining up, whispering softly. But anyone passing the surveillance room glanced in, wanting to imprint the image of a once notorious cop now shrinking in handcuffs. A couple of eyes showed quiet satisfaction because, at least today, justice did not have to shout to be heard. Naomi stepped back gently, brushing her swollen wrist as if touching a self-forgiven medal of fire. Her gaze no longer lingered on Grady. Instead, she faced the door squarely, back straight, shoulders sweeping through the hallway light. The outside wind whispered a thin gust, tossing the ends of her hair, casting her long shadow on the cold floor. That silhouette passed the curious crowd watching, leaving behind a blunt reminder. Handcuffs are for those who need them, not for justice. The steel door closed quietly behind. Inside, Grady crawled, knees bent, eyes rolling white, breath broken. Outside, Naomi stepped into the midday sunbeam, light 100 times brighter than the shadows inside the surveillance room, where a predator had just turned himself into prey. Naomi had not left yet. The hallway door remained open, casting a long streak of light down to her feet, but her low-heeled shoes did not move. After a breath, she pivoted and returned to the surveillance table. No one dared stop her, no one dared ask. They instinctively parted like dry scraps of paper swept off a desk. Grady was still held kneeling on the floor, his breathing shallow and wheezing like an asthmatic, his lungs heaving but no longer able to project any authority. Seeing Naomi return, he struggled, lips twitching. What do you intend to do? You think you've won? You want to scare me? His voice faltered like a leaking pipe, threatening no one but himself. Naomi said nothing. She bent over and gently pushed the stack of reports Grady had forced her to sign to the corner of the table, the rustle of paper dry as a reputation about to be torn apart. From her bra pocket, she pulled out a rigid ID card with a silver edge, shining under the surveillance room's lights. The embossed lettering clearly read, Head of Security, Central Hospital. The red official seal sat close to Naomi Carter's name, and a shimmering blue anti-counterfeit stamp glowed in the corner. The table vibrated slightly as the card touched the wood. Naomi did not raise it for show. She let it lie, cold and heavy like a stone lodged in Grady's throat. A few young security guards glanced at each other, their expressions shifting from pity for the wronged nurse to wary respect. Grady swallowed hard, bloodshot eyes veined red, voice distorted as if about to cry. You're using that to scare me? I'm also a high-ranking officer, His threat broke off when Naomi took out a thick gold stamp paper and placed it beside the card. The paper trembled slightly in the air conditioning, but the bold print did not. URGN, meeting invitation with the Civil Rights Protection Committee. The date is clearly stated. Today, this afternoon, at the City Hall meeting room. The atmosphere thickened like coagulated glue. An old inspector with faded badges whispered to the supermarket manager standing nearby, "Turns out she is the safety anchor for this whole system. We thought she was just a frontline medical worker." The manager nodded softly, eyes fixed on Naomi as if she were an iron pillar rising amid muddy sludge. Naomi's lawyer adjusted his tie, his voice deep and steady, not needing a microphone but loud enough for all to hear. From now on, this is no longer a meaningless theft case. This is a file on abuse of power, illegal detention, tied to an old string of complaints that Mr. Miller here thought were buried. Ms. Carter will directly oversee the sealing and transfer of the entire file to the governor's office. Grady's mouth opened, but only heavy breaths like an old pump came out. His cuffed hands twitched wildly, nails scraping the cold porcelain floor, leaving fresh red scratches. The kind of cowardly blood no one wanted to wash away anymore. Naomi still did not touch him, did not kick or waste words. She just leaned slightly, letting her shadow cover the pile of files and the sins tied before her. Her voice dropped low enough to separate from every other sound. "I'm not threatening you, Miller. I'm ordering." The surveillance room froze. People began to understand that in this town today, real power did not lie in a gun or the badge Grady still wore like a talisman, but in the card slammed down on the table and the cold mind of the woman standing before him. The old inspector leaned forward, slowly lifting the urgent meeting invitation from the table. The fluorescent light reflected off the embossed red seal. The paper's edge trembled slightly in his hand, but not his gaze. He looked at Naomi, nodded, then turned to the security team. "Seal all related files. Take him to the detention room immediately. Anyone obstructing will face consequences." Two soft armored guards stepped forward, each gripping one of Grady's arms tightly. He roared, eyes wild. "Don't touch me! I'll sue you, Carter! I'll call my lawyer! I'll call the press!" His voice choked into a coughing fit as one guard suddenly twisted his shoulder back after he struggled too hard. No one in the room bothered to intervene or listen anymore. Those who had been holding their breath just moments ago turned away, some bowing to sign records, others quietly snapping a few more photos for internal records. No one dared block Naomi again. The lawyer adjusted his collar, voice cutting the air in two, aimed squarely at the reporters crowded outside the hallway. "Enough witnesses, enough video, enough legal invitation. This file will not be buried under the table. Anyone covering up or whitewashing will be exposed. I guarantee this on behalf of Head Carter." The name Head Carter landed firmly. No one objected or corrected it to Nurse Carter as before. A child walking by with her mother tugged at her hand and whispered, "Mom, is she a police officer?" The mother did not answer, murmuring instead as if to herself, "She is the law here." Grady was dragged away, his head twisted, eyes still searching for allies, but finding only lowered gazes or backs turned. He hissed, foam spitting, "I'm not a pawn, His sentence ended as he was shoved through the iron door leading to the temporary holding area. The sound of dragging shoes left a cold sweat trail and a shiver following the steps of everyone with a guilty conscience. Naomi did not watch him leave. She stood tall, eyes sweeping the room, still heavy with the scent of air conditioning and half an hour of held breaths. Her voice was neither loud nor deep, just steady like a locking bolt. "Anyone who aids him, prepare to face me again. No one behind him will escape. Remember well, he was only a pawn discarded." An old staff member swallowed unconsciously, fingers tightening white-knuckled around a clipboard edge. The inspector signed the sealing records, tucked the meeting invitation into his briefcase, then bowed slightly before Naomi without a word more. Reporters pressed against the glass outside, but Naomi glanced just once, enough to make them lower their cameras and silence their microphones. She turned, hand brushing lightly on the table edge where the head of security card still lay neatly. Her finger touched its corner, then let go. A brief moment, like a reminder. Real power does not lie in a piece of hardened plastic, but in a mind cold enough to break chains everyone feared. Naomi strode out into the hallway, her silhouette squared in the open doorway. The wind rushed in from outside, sweeping away the sense of fear, leaving a patch of midday light for justice to keep revealing itself. Behind her, the card still lay there, waiting for anyone who forgot the lesson to bow their head and look again. Grady was dragged out to the supermarket's main lobby like a defective product just unwrapped in front of customers. His shirt was wrinkled, the badge crooked on his chest, his hands still loosely cuffed but tightly gripped by two security guards on either side, preventing him from moving more than half a step. His face was pale gray, his back soaked with sweat, and his hair clumped into dirty streaks. The checkout area was packed with people finishing their shifts. Some customers paused while scanning their items, pushing their carts aside to pull out their phones. The tapping on screens and the beep sounds from mobile cameras echoed sharply, like claws, scraping directly at Grady's face. He tried to shrink his shoulders and lower his head to avoid the light, but the ceiling lights were too bright and the crowd too dense. There was no hiding spot for this cop to conceal his terrified face. He let out an old growl. Ha ha, I'll sue every one of you. Anyone filming me, I'll punish you all. Do you even know who I am? The supermarket manager appeared right behind Grady, his voice low but firm, like a hammer hitting a table. Please, everyone, keep order. We are cooperating with internal inspectors and any obstruction will be dealt with. If anyone has footage or witnessed the incident, please keep it carefully. Justice this time depends on evidence from all of you. Some young people raised their phones closer to Grady's face. Flashes swept from his hair down to his sweat-drenched collar. One laughed. "Hey, officer, where is your courage? Why are you shaking so much?" The laughter was sharp, like a small knife, cutting through the shredded pride Grady had worn for years under his authority and badge. He struggled to pull his arm away from the guards, shouting curses. "Let go! I still have the right to make calls. I have connections. Try touching me and see what happens." The younger guard said nothing, but firmly pushed Grady's arm off and gripped his wrist tightly. A slight shove, but enough for bystanders to see that the man who once cuffed others was now held like a package about to be stamped guilty. An elderly vegetable seller, hunched over and leaning against a luggage cart, curled her lips and spat bitterly. All those years he wore the hat, scared everyone into silence. Now look. Fate has dealt with him, dear. He's just a uniform, rotten inside. Who's afraid of that? Her words fell onto the cold tile floor like sizzling oil drops, sparking murmurs that spread quickly around. The checkout area felt like an impromptu market. People were buying and paying, but their eyes never left the scene of an officer cuffed and bowed down like a criminal in the middle of the crowd. A child peeked from behind his mother and asked, "Mom, is that man bad?" The mother nodded slightly, her voice low. "Very bad. That's why he's held like a thief." Grady swallowed hard and tried to lift his face, searching for someone, teammates, old bosses, or even a stranger who still believed in his innocence. But every glance he received was cold, like untempered steel, sharp and direct, stripping away the mask he had built for years with power and a badge. Whispers mixed with barcode scanner beeps, the sound of packing boxes, and the screech of shopping carts. No one shouted or pushed. This crowd needed no official court. They had become a social tribunal. Each looked like a hammer striking the neck of the once arrogant man. And Grady, once shouting commands on the street, now only hung his head. His eyes no longer dared meet anyone's gaze. His shoulders sagged and his mouth repeated fragmented, meaningless phrases. The farce inflated around the rotten police label. Each stare peeled it off with no mercy. Before the crowd could thin, the internal inspection team arrived. No sirens, no banners, just neatly dressed men with badges on their chests, stepping heavily like the heavy cuffs they carried in their pockets. The sound of their leather shoes on the supermarket tiles matched the beating of Grady's heart. An older inspector nodded to his juniors, his voice low but commanding people to clear the way without yelling. "Verify witnesses, record names, collect all footage by hand, don't miss a single frame. Keep the subject secure, read the rights aloud, don't let him twist words anymore." Two young inspectors grabbed Grady. The clink of metal cuffs against belt buckles sounded like a coffin being nailed shut. He looked up, his cracked lips dry, voice choking like someone swallowing a fishbone. "Please, let me explain. I still have people at the department. I was just doing my duty." Person filming pointed the camera straight at Grady's face and said loudly without hiding, "He once fined me $300 for parking a few minutes over the line. After paying, he whispered slanders, remarks about me all over the market. Now he's paid his dues, officer." Grady heard but no longer had the strength to shout. His throat rasped a few breaths. Then he let out a desperate growl. "Carter, don't think you've won. I will come back. I will. But the threat fell into the stifling lobby, torn apart by barcode beeps, cartwheels screeching, and chatter that didn't bother lowering voices. "Hey, have you studied justice yet?" A teen with a backpack laughed brightly, turning to a classmate teasingly after gym class. "Next time you want to do something stupid, think of this guy first, to avoid mistakes." Grady shrugged, but his hands were bent behind his back. Every jerk tightened the cuff straps on his veins. His face, once purple with anger, now glistened with sweat. His wild eyes no longer held any authority to scare the kid. A middle-aged man patted his son's shoulder and sighed. "Remember, son, justice doesn't wear anyone's clothes. Police or suit, it's the same. Dirt stains the face." Outside in the parking lot, the inspector's SUV door was open and waiting. Grady was pushed step by step, stumbling on the tile edge with no one helping. He looked up one last time, lips trembling as he called Naomi's name. But Naomi was no longer there. She did not need to witness the moment he was forced into the vehicle, because she had already set all the pieces in place for the truth to catch the wrongdoer. Naomi's lawyer stood with arms crossed near the security gate, nodding slightly to the inspector before saying something short enough for reporters to catch. "From now on, anyone shielding him will stand right here, in this exact spot, in front of your cameras." Grady was shoved hard, his body collapsing onto the SUV's back seat. The door slammed shut with a dry thud, like a coffin locking a farce that had already rotted away. Inside the vehicle, Grady opened his mouth to shout again, but the dark-tinted windows hid his face from the public eye. The noon sun shone down on the parking lot, glaring off the inspector's SUV roof like a sharp, solid period drilled into the minds of anyone who once believed power was a shield to oppress others. People began pushing their carts forward, finishing payment for their groceries. No one followed or mourned. Only the story of a cuffed cop in the supermarket lingered, becoming a legend to warn the remaining green uniforms. Justice needs no uniform. It lives in the eyes of those who dare to expose the wicked. Grady sat hunched on the metal chair in the security room, his collar crooked, sweat dripping at his temples. Outside the one-way glass, the supermarket manager and Naomi's lawyer stood talking, occasionally glancing inside. In this rare moment when only the two of them remained, Grady sniffed quietly, his eyes hardening like a trapped beast, refusing to die easily. "Do you think tying me up here means it's over?" His voice dropped, hoarse, trying to suppress trembling. "Sneaking around with cameras, dragging in lawyers, threatening lawsuits. None of that scares us. I'm not acting alone." Naomi said nothing, just tilted her head, silently watching Grady's lips twitch when he said us. He clenched his teeth and continued, his tone low as if hissing through barred doors. "This whole department, you think it's clean? I'm telling you, I'm just the tail of the snake. A few guys wearing badges who owe me favors. One councilman blindly approved our patrol overtime budget without asking for reports. A contractor who builds public housing, dirty money up to his neck. They don't like noise. You drag me into the light, you drag them all out. You think they'll just sit still for you?" He leaned forward, the cuffs clicking, his breath smelling of tobacco mixed with fear. "I'll say it again. You mess with me, you mess with them. You won't have a minute's peace, got it, Naomi Carter?" Naomi still didn't interrupt. Her face remained unchanged except for a slight blink, as if recording every twitch at the corner of his mouth. She slowly leaned back against the wall, hands loosely clasped before her stomach. Her calmness was like a bucket of cold water dousing Grady's threatening roar. Left alone in silence, he dug deeper into what he believed was her hidden fear. "You know what?" His tone shifted, twisted with triumph. "There was this Eddie Bell once, a lieutenant in internal affairs who thought he was smart. He dug through my files, found fake parking tickets, phony drug fines, all sorts. Guess where he is now? Gone from patrol. His files disappeared and his wife and kids vanished back to her home state. You want the same fate, Naomi?" She stood still, tilting her head slightly, eyes never leaving Grady's trembling hand on the steel table. The security room was dead silent, except for the faint static of ceiling cameras recording every threat Grady hoped would shake her. Naomi knew he was half telling the truth. He still clung to a tiny illusion of power, holding on to the shadow of the past to comfort himself. But she also understood that behind that arrogant shell was a swarm of leeches feeding on budgets, votes, and the fear of ordinary people. And without uprooting them all, no corrupt cop like Grady would ever truly disappear. In the hallway, the lawyer ended his call. The sound of a door unlatching signaled the pause in confrontation. Grady still growled his last words, voice cracked from dryness. "I say this one last time. Don't touch the snake's nest, Naomi, or you'll get swallowed whole." Naomi smiled faintly, said nothing, but her eyes locked firmly on Grady's cuffed wrist, as if marking the final period to his filthy threat. She stayed by the security room door a few more seconds, fingers tapping steadily on the cold stainless steel table. This room, normally used to hold petty thieves or kids sneaking into the supermarket, had become an unintended stage for an old snake tying himself to the mud he once thought would swallow others. Grady Miller sat angled across from her, leaning back slightly, eyes glaring like a chained wild animal. He sneered, but the laugh stuck in his throat as Naomi pulled on a nurse's glove, turning the white fabric inside out, like shedding a disguise. She didn't look at him immediately. Instead, she pulled a neatly folded brown paper envelope from her pocket. Inside clipped a brand new hospital security ID badge stamped in bright red. Alongside it was a thin sheet of paper headed clearly summons for confrontation before the inspector's office. She placed both on the table, the sound of paper meeting steel, crisp and orderly, like a safety latch snapping off a chamber. Naomi lowered her voice just enough for Grady to hear. "You think you're snakes? Fine. I will strip your skin, layer by layer." Grady forced a strained smile, teeth clenched, jaw tight. Outside the glass door, the supermarket manager was on alert, two security guards tightening their belts, eyes shifting, waiting for a signal. Tension threaded through the breaths of everyone in the room. Only Naomi remained steady, like checking the pulse of an unconscious patient rather than facing a dying beast. The iron door creaked open. Naomi's lawyer returned, holding a small laptop, tapping a few keys before turning the screen toward her. "I've filed the complaint along with all clips and evidence to the press. The state legal journal promised to run the story in the earliest issue." Grady twitched his shoulder, ready to slam the table and stand, but before he could stretch his hand, two guards blocked him. One reached to his belt where a spare cuff pouch hung, pushing it aside to prevent any tricks. Naomi glanced down at him, slowly slipping the nurse's glove back on. The gesture seemed gentle, but to Grady, used to giving orders, forcing others to kneel before police power, it was a slap to his last illusion of safety. She closed the brown envelope, turned her back to the door, and before leaving the security room threw back a phrase sharp as a razor blade that cut straight through the hollow pride of the dirty cop. "Don't threaten me with darkness. I am your flashlight." The door closed behind her. The sound of rubber soles scraping tile dragged Grady back into his seat. The lawyer packed away his laptop, exchanged quick words with the supermarket manager to ensure Grady had no escape. An employee ran out to briefly inform the waiting media in the lobby that a story hotter than any summer electricity bill was about to break. In Naomi's mind, as she walked down the cool hallway leading to the parking lot, the real plan was just beginning to sprout. Grady was only the first link. She knew very well this corrupt police network was 100 times thicker than the web of guilt he had just wrapped around his own wrists. A secret investigation file had been quietly unlocked weeks ago. A list of officers wrongly accused, recordings of anonymous calls threatening victim silence, disciplinary reports quietly buried under stacks of paperwork. Grady thought today he would be humiliated in the supermarket, then get away. But Naomi would not let him disappear deeper. She would pull every snake from the dark nest, strip their filthy skins, and expose them layer by layer to public scrutiny. And then a town long pretending to sleep would have to wake up, stunned to realize that justice never dies. It only sharpens its claws, waiting for the day to tear apart those who once thought themselves hunters. Naomi pushed open the automatic glass door and stepped outside. The midday sunlight pierced straight through the grocery store and hit her eyes sharply. She squinted slightly, her left hand touching her right wrist, which was still swollen and red, the cuff marks blotching the dark brown skin beneath. Metal-eft marks that could easily fade, but the way it deeply wounded a person's dignity did not vanish so easily. The heat of the sun poured fiercely onto the top of her head, reflecting off the wrinkled white shirt that had been tugged earlier. Naomi stood right at the threshold, not moving yet, ignoring the cluster of people at the fruit stand a few meters away who glanced at her, whispered, then quickly tapped on their phones. She did not look back or care what they were recording or writing. What needed proving had been left inside the security room. A light breeze swept through the supermarket entrance, carrying the scent of ripe fruit and the cool air conditioning from inside. It brushed past Naomi's neck, gently flipping a strand of hair at the nape. She stood still, eyes open, as if willing the wind to carry away the murmurs, the probing stares, and the faint scent of fearful sweat lingering somewhere nearby. Images replayed slowly but clearly in Naomi's mind. Grady pressing a pen into her hand, forcing her to sign, the poor guard locking the door, the click of the latch like another set of handcuffs on her wrist. Then the click came when the security manager played the clip, exposing the vicious hunting dog in front of everyone. All of this happened in one afternoon. Only minutes, but enough to drive another stake into the nest of snakes crawling in the shadows for so long. Naomi stepped down the 3 steps, her white shoes gathering some gravel dust from the parking lot. She opened the trunk of the silver-gray sedan, took out a small paper bag holding a water bottle and some miscellaneous items left unfinished. With her other hand, she gently placed a brown file folder on the back seat, moving slowly as if putting down something fragile. Only this file contained sharp stakes enough to pierce the sealed bags of the false justice imposters. Naomi closed the trunk, her shadow stretching long on the sun-stained concrete. The sun hung slanted overhead, blazing like an uncovered furnace. She tilted her head back, eyes looking straight up, eyelids twitching slightly from the strong light, but never lowering. There was nothing to bow to. What deserved to be bowed to was being held in the surveillance room behind her. The sound of running sneakers echoed behind her. A figure in a blue uniform stopped a few steps away, breathing heavily. It was the young security guard, his face still youthful, sweat beading beneath his cap's brim. He stammered, "I heard about you. I know you'll beat them, won't you?" Naomi looked at him for a long moment, then her lips curled into a faint but warm smile. She neither stepped closer nor patted his shoulder like a superior comforting a subordinate. Her voice came out thin but heavier than any oath. "Winning is not the final goal. Awakening is what matters." The guard stood still, blinking as if hearing something bigger than an answer. Naomi didn't wait for him to say more. She turned, opened the driver's door with a decisive motion. When the door shut, the windshield reflected the vast sky without a single cloud. A streak of light cut across the glass, flashing through her pupils like a sharpened sword waiting to strike down the rotten disguise still worn by someone's uniform on their shoulders. The engine started with a low but steady rumble. Naomi lowered one hand to the steering wheel, her thumb gently stroking the red cuff mark that had not yet faded. Hot exhaust smoke drifted from the tailpipe, sweeping away the remaining noise at the supermarket entrance. She remained sitting straight-backed, eyes fixed on the glaring road ahead, as if she had never known what it meant to step back. Naomi fastened her seatbelt, the metal click locking tightly like an iron shackle she herself had fastened on every retreating path. Her left wrist was still swollen and red. Every time skin touched the steering wheel, pain flared like salt poured on a wound. But she did not pull her hand away. Her hands trembled slightly, a reflex left after the forced signature, the grab at her collar, the screech of the cuffs by her ear. But beneath her ribs, inside her chest, there was absolutely no room left for fear. The car's air conditioner turned on, cold air slipping through her shirt collar, sweeping away the heat and burnt dust smell from the parking lot. Naomi leaned back in her seat, slowly inhaling and exhaling. The cold made her skin tighten slightly, but it could not cool the pulse in her head beating steadily and firmly. The sun outside still blazed on the car roof, the ceiling vibrating lightly under the heat. But inside Naomi's cabin was a cold storm, controlled by only one person. She closed her eyes and let the last image of Grady fade like an old film. He was forced by the supermarket manager to sign an investigation report right inside the surveillance room, his face pale as flour, his mouth twisted, unable to utter any more threats. Naomi did not lower or raise her voice, only spoke just enough for him to hear. "One stake is enough to pierce the title you have carried for 10 years. I will not pull it out, Miller. I will plant many more stakes." A call notification interrupted the cabin. Naomi opened her eyes, glanced at the screen. Darnell, former security deputy captain. She pressed the answer button. On the other side was a man's hoarse but urgent voice, no greeting wasted. "Naomi, it's done. All the original files have been encrypted. We hold the decryption key. If they betray us, one press, and it will be made public." Naomi nodded, her lips curving slightly like someone listening to a routine report. She said only one word, dry as a coal in a furnace. "Good." Then she hung up without letting the other side say another word. The game with Grady was closed. But the nest of snakes had more than one. She knew well she had just touched the last scale of that rotten nest. She raised her hand, placed her palm on the wrist still marked by the cuffs. The cold metal sensation today would linger in her nerves for many days. Naomi would not let it be just a wound. She hammered it into memory like someone nailing a fiery metal onto their chest, to remind herself every time it hurt that she still owed those filthy people a complete cleansing. The sunlight outside the windshield still poured shamelessly, as if it had never witnessed any dirt in that security room. Naomi looked straight ahead, her eyelids twitching slightly, then still as a lake surface when the wind just stopped. She pressed the accelerator. The car left the lot, tires grinding gravel dust into a broken gray trail stretching behind. The road leading to the main avenue was straight like a spear piercing the city's belly. Naomi tightened her grip on the wheel, her spine stretched taut, the red cuff mark imprinted on her skin still fresh, but it could not crush the smile swelling in her throat. A white patrol SUV passed in the opposite direction, and the young police officer in the passenger seat looked up and caught Naomi's eyes through the glass. He paused, furrowing his brows, as if trying to confirm if the midday street rumor was true. Naomi did not look away. She pressed the gas pedal again, letting the door to the past close behind her. In her mind echoed not a vow, but a sharpened blade was ready. "Try touching me. I will drag you all into the light." At 7 o'clock in the morning, the first news broadcast went live on the local online news portal. The headline was enlarged, black letters on a white background standing out on the phone screen. "Hero catching thieves," or "An abuse of power. Camera exposes the truth about Officer Miller." Below the headline was a blurry clip cut from the supermarket camera, just a few dozen seconds, but enough to show Grady's hand stealthily pinching a pack of cigarettes, skillfully slipping it into Naomi's handbag, then putting on a dignified air as he dragged her to the checkout counter. The reporter who posted the article was a novice, struggling in his career because he dared to touch police affairs in the area. He heard the news from supermarket staff, obtained the clip, then rushed out with the sensational article overnight. Within less than an hour, the shares started exploding. At a roadside cafe, a group of drivers sat on wooden stools, crowding around a phone. "Hey, Miller's been exposed. That guy caught me last year, fined me unfairly, and patted his chest, saying, 'Try suing me.'" Another laughed bitterly, flicking a cigarette butt onto the concrete floor. "Let's see if he still dares to show off now." The Central Market also buzzed with rumors at midday. Among the vegetable stalls, old Mrs. Two, selling flowers, fanned herself, repeatedly telling anyone nearby, "He stopped my vehicle last year, found excuses to fine me 20 dong. I'm old, don't know the law to argue, so I swallowed the bitterness. Now let's see who really deserves to be caught." A kid carrying ice water ran past, curiously asking his mother, "Mom, is Mr. Miller really mean?" The mother waved her hand. "Focus on your studies. Don't get caught unjustly like others. It's tough, dear." While the whole town was in an uproar, Naomi's phone remained silent. A major newspaper knocked on her email inbox requesting an exclusive interview. An online news channel left a public comment. "Ms. Carter, please speak out so the public can understand better." Naomi read the messages, eyes scanning each line, but did not reply. Instead of letting public opinion push and pull, she chose to stand still amid the wind. At this moment, words were less valuable. Silence, silence, allowing the public to stir themselves. At school during recess, high school students played the clip right on the grassy yard. The mechanic's son nudged his friend. "Look, Miller's been exposed. My mom said anyone who messes with him before is unlucky, but meeting Ms. Carter, that's tough." The group giggled with childish voices, but the rumor spread faster than the recess bell. A group of construction workers gathered around sandwiches in the park, eating while sharing the article on their phones. Everyone had a story to whisper. "Back then, he fined my uncle for not signaling, kept the papers for 3 weeks. Truly a dog who thought he owned the neighborhood." Another broke his sandwich, squinting in the sunlight through the leaves. "But daring to provoke the police brings trouble. Watch out, they might retaliate against Ms. Carter or two." The rumor split into two camps. One felt satisfied that finally the powerful had been unmasked. The others sighed, telling each other, "Just know it. Don't spread nonsense. Who knows, the whole police force might come to silence everyone." In a small apartment in the southern part of town, Naomi sat at her desk, sunlight filtering through the curtains onto her shoulder. The laptop screen glowed silently, the article's headline shining bright. Carter, the woman standing alone before the handcuffs. She exhaled, closed the laptop, letting her name enter the public's mouth while she prepared for the next battle, a battle without microphones or reporters by her side. A child from the neighborhood ran past, looking up at Naomi's window, whispering to a friend, "They say Miss Carter is very brave. When we grow up and get bullied, we might want to be like her, right?" That sentence slipped through the crack in the door, mingling with the steady spin of the ceiling fan, like a naive prophecy about an involuntary symbol named Carter, growing bigger from the mouths of the town's people themselves. The first news was like a match thrown straight into a dry haystack. After the local novice reporter's article, a series of major newspapers smelled blood. The headline on a central news bulletin dropped a black bomb. "Helena Town Police, the real face behind the shiny badge." The article was not long, but planted enough hooks to lure readers to related stories, uncovering the stains Grady Miller had skillfully erased from records. A veteran reporter once warned for daring to question the budget maintenance of the Narcotics Crime Investigation Department, now openly revealed his name. He opened his new article with a sharp sentence, "When one rat's tail shows, the whole nest will be exposed. Grady is just the first broken fang." Inside the police department, the third-floor hallway, where young officers often secretly gathered to smoke, suddenly remained eerily silent for days. A patrolman with a still, acne-faced young face secretly slipped a thick envelope into a messenger's hand. Inside was not only a copy of Grady's disciplinary record, buried for 3 years, but also a note full of names of accidents during Grady's night patrols. Under the article, netizens did not miss a beat. One wrote, "I knew it. Don't think it's all clean. Just a pity Carter didn't live stream that. The handcuff kidnapping clip would be even more epic." Another sneered, "No live stream needed. Just watch how she dragged the whole nest into the light. Respect." The hashtag Justice for Carter trended in less than 4 hours. No one expected a female nurse, who had never lectured or held a press mic, to become the name forcing the snake nest to crawl out and greet the public. In a law office in the town's center, an old air conditioner hummed beside a pile of fresh files. A famous human rights lawyer with salt and pepper hair but a voice tougher than all the inspectors combined declared straight on the midday radio news, "Anyone falsely accused by Officer Grady Miller and his gang I will represent for free and bring all to court. Justice is not for sale. No fees charged." A student listening to the radio peeled a bag of potato chips while looking at the photocopied papers of fines Grady issued 2 years ago. Then, "Bring it on, sir. I've been waiting for this day for a long time." Amid the chaos outside, Naomi remained silent. No statements, no corrections, no claiming heroism. Inside the small apartment, she spread all the old files on the wooden table, marking Grady's name in red, circling a few other names beside him, faces always smirking behind Grady, patting him on the shoulder like protectors. She did not need the media to beautify the words. She needed to know which roots still lay deep, which roots had not yet shown. Every ink mark, every forgotten cry in past plea letters now lay in her hands, like the backbone to tear apart the snake nest hiding within the police shell. One hot afternoon, she folded the file, looking at the cover with the nameplate Grady Miller, her finger gently stroking the peeled corner of the tape. Her lips moved softly, not speaking to anyone, but reminding her own blood, "There are many like you. I still have the skill." Outside the window, sunlight swept a sharp golden line across the gray-tiled floor. Naomi stood up, opened the curtains, letting the scorching sunlight flood the messy room of files. Only she knew this domino move had just touched the smallest snake nest. The real storm. She would take the wheel and drive straight through it. The first message arrived in the newsroom inbox at 2 a.m. Just a few dry lines without punctuation. Grady was caught taking protection money from a bar 5 years ago, but the file disappeared. The file custodian, Deputy Chief Randall. No signature, no callback number, but enough to keep the night reporter awake, brewing 3 more pots of coffee before rushing the draft straight to the top of the investigative section. Before dawn broke, another newsroom picked up the story with new details. Grady had once been protected by a deputy chief. That deputy was none other than Randall, a close drinking buddy who once slammed a table, claiming, "I may not have a degree, but every officer respects me." Now, the name Randall attached to Grady surfaced in the papers like a rotten piece of meat at a morning market. At 6:30 a.m., the Internal Affairs Office of the police department turned on the lights for an emergency meeting. The room smelled of old paper. The cold air from the air conditioner washed over officers squeezed around a long wooden table. A whiteboard stood temporarily filled with case names, bullet points as clear as a verdict waiting to be pronounced. Those who once drank and posed shoulder to shoulder with Grady now hung their heads low. Outside in the hallway, a veteran officer with graying hair sat in the duty room, pushing his coffee cup to the edge of the table, curling his lips into a sneer and muttering, "It's over. This rat is dragging the whole nest down." His laughter failed to come out, stuck bitterly in his throat after decades wearing the same uniform as the people now about to be exposed. In the corner of the meeting room, Randall sat frozen like a gray Buddha statue. His phone kept buzzing, messages from his wife, from banker cousins, from a familiar lawyer. Each message carried one meaning. Should I send the kid to my mother's house for a few months? The back of Randall's shirt was soaked, the sweat forming the clear shape of the gun holstered at his side, now just a useless prop. At the office corridor's far end, 4 young patrol officers squeezed together, waiting outside Human Resources. In their hands, hastily folded resignation letters showed creases at the edges. One glanced around and whispered, "I'm not involved with Grady's scandal, but don't want my name dragged in. Who can live on a pittance?" The one beside him smiled crookedly. "I'm just scared Carter will pull out some new clip. Scared me to death." Then the group fell silent as heavy footsteps echoed slowly but heavily like a coffin lid closing down the hallway. A lieutenant emerged from the disciplinary room, clutching a stack of yellowed files. He glanced at the young men and grunted softly. "Hand it in quickly. Quit early and keep your clean face." Before he finished, the glass door at the corridor's entrance slammed open. Reporters pressed their faces against the glass, cameras raised, lights flashing. No one shouted or chased them away. No more yelling out, "Restricted area." Everyone just bowed their heads, pulled the door, and shut it. The heavy hinge's creak sounded like an exclamation mark pounding on the dull gray concrete wall. In the first-floor restroom, a young officer pressed his face against the mirror, splashing cold water repeatedly. At his feet lay 3 old, torn complaint papers scattered under the sink. He stared at his reflection through the dripping water and muttered like a mantra, "Be quiet, be good, get through this." But behind the frosted restroom door, someone was secretly recording every whispered word to use later, like a small knife ready to cut the rotten vines growing around the name Grady Miller. At the Helena police station, no one dared to laugh loudly anymore. Laughter had once distracted the public, hiding arrests and the smell of dirty money. Now there were only doors opening and closing, echoing down the long corridor like hammer blows sealing the coffin of what was called justice, once polished on every officer's chest badge. And beyond the hallway glass, everyone knew Naomi Carter still held the knife, waiting to finish cutting the snake nest that hadn't yet slithered away. Before the first night rain had stopped, in a worn law office amid Helena's commercial district, neon lights blazed on. Inside, 5 men in gray suits sat around a long wooden table, cigarette ashes falling onto a still new desk pad printed with the law firm's logo. No one touched the steaming teacup in the center. A balding man wearing a skewed blue tie tapped a red pen on a file marked in messy handwriting, "Grady, Grassy. I'll blame everything on that fool." His voice rang out, sharp as a hammer striking a nail. He pointed at the report detailing suspicious payments flowing through Grady's hands, connected to intermediaries everyone knew but no one wanted exposed. A gray-haired man with a smoker's hoarse voice sniffed, "What if Grady talks? Don't forget Carter isn't the type to be silenced." The man with the blue tie sneered. "What can a low-level officer bite? I told you, let the lawyer run a script admitting minor abuse of power, self-made slush funds, no one else involved. If Carter blows the case, she can be accused of obstructing justice. Simple." The atmosphere thickened like smoldering smoke. Outside in the empty corridor, a janitor stopped by the glass door, listened briefly, then slipped away into the shadows. In his jacket pocket was a small recorder, and Naomi Carter knew this janitor's real name was Fan, a former subordinate who owed her for saving his daughter from a school abandonment sentence. At the same time, in Naomi's phone inbox, a message appeared from an unknown number. "Stop, Carter, this time you'll lose your life." No punctuation, no signature. Naomi sat in her private office, yellow desk lamp illuminating a pile of papers like a small mountain. She held her phone, read the message without a single frown. Her finger lightly swiped to press delete, not a moment of hesitation. Immediately after, she opened her recording app and found the clip Fan sent minutes earlier, the blue-tie man's voice, clear and blunt. "Just let Grady take the fall. If you open your mouth, expect to rot in jail with him." Naomi attached the file, typed the subject line, a corner of the snake nest, just the overture, then pressed send to the 3 largest state newsrooms. The whoosh sound confirmed the file had been sent. Naomi closed her phone, leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling stained with rainwater, thinking of the price those suited men were about to pay. Inside, Fan, the rat inside the snake nest, slipped through the dark corridor, exiting the back door, sending one final message to Naomi. "They are burning the original files. I'm sending the location." The message was just one line, but after reading it, Naomi's lips twitched into a stiff smile. "Let them burn. The originals won't save the nest, but the knives will be sharpened from the ashes." At night, the clock on the wall ticked relentlessly. Under the desk lamp, Naomi reached out and flipped the newly printed file hacked by Fan. On the front page was a list of blurred names, each one a neck waiting for the blade she would bring down. She tapped her fingernail sharply on the paper 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Her other hand clenched tightly. The handcuff marks Grady left had faded, but the wounds of humiliation and the burning desire to expose this beast pack still glowed red in her blood. Naomi closed the file, poured another glass of water, her eyes wide open staring at her reflection on the black glass door, reflecting Helena's night filled with corrupt schemes. A soft sentence escaped her lips, like both reassurance and declaration of war. "This snake nest is not dead yet, but I'm not afraid to be bitten. I'm only afraid I haven't sharpened my knife enough." At 6 a.m., the Central Hospital began a new day with the steady sound of stretcher wheels rolling down the corridor, the noise of medicine preparation, ringing phones, and soft, brief greetings that tied people together amidst the scent of antiseptic. Naomi Carter appeared exactly on time, wearing a spotless nurse uniform, her name tag pinned straight on her left chest, a wrist bruise hidden beneath the long sleeve just enough to be discreet, though no one failed to notice it was still there. As Naomi stepped past the administrative office glass door, two night shift nurses bowed their heads slightly, avoiding direct eye contact, but naturally straightening their backs, lowering their voices, afraid to disturb someone standing amid a storm of rumors, yet unbowed. Naomi said little. She held a file, flipping quickly through it, ink blurring into familiar handwriting. Her hand, once trembling under handcuffs, was now steady, like the hospital bed frame she checked every night. She did not ask about yesterday. No one dared bring it up, but no one could stop themselves from whispering when she passed by. "Carter is really strong, huh?" An elderly patient lightly tapped the shoulder of a young orderly pushing the medicine cart, voice hoarse but clear enough for Thu, walking close to Naomi to hear everything. Thu, a petite woman with hair tied neatly, quick-stepped alongside Naomi, tilting her head and whispering, "Are you still planning to continue? Those people haven't forgiven you yet. I heard from some elders. They might even try something more." Naomi did not lift her head. Her pen still touched paper, listing drug names, dosages, and instructions for the new nurse to remember. Her mouth curved slightly into a soft smile, as if the question was neither new nor frightening. "As long as there are patients, there is me. As long as the snake nest exists, I have a knife to sharpen." Thu hesitated for half a beat, pressed her lips, then nodded, clutching her blouse sleeves tightly to hide her trembling. Years under Naomi's leadership, she had never seen her sister cry from injustice, never heard her sigh under threat, nor bow when someone shouted. But this morning, Thu was certain. Naomi's calm was not indifference, but an unspoken promise. Along the corridor, patients waiting in chairs nodded gently at Naomi as if greeting a benefactor. The elderly showed respect while the young mixed awe with goosebumps. They heard all the rumors about the officer handcuffed in front of the supermarket, about leaked clips, about the urgent meeting soon to explode at City Hall. Yet seeing Naomi, they felt lighter, as if justice, though sometimes asleep, still had someone watching. A rookie nurse, less than 3 months out of school, timidly tugged Thu's sleeve and whispered, "Is she, Miss Carter, really not afraid?" Thu smiled, lips pressed, but eyes brightening. "She is afraid. She fears justice sleeping, but those who threaten her, she treats them like flies." Naomi put down her pen on the duty desk and flipped to the last file. Her hand lightly skimmed the paper edge, eyes resting beyond the old hallway window. Morning sunlight slanted through dust streaks, scattering fragile threads of light in her hair. Stubborn faith not easily brushed away. Thu stepped closer and quietly asked, "Is there anything you want me to prepare?" Naomi turned her head, voice low enough to be carried by the corridor breeze, reaching the ears of curious people outside the pharmacy. "Prepare. Tonight, I will send the rest of the list." Thursday did not ask what list. She simply bowed her head, pressed her lips, stepped back and nodded as if sealing an oath. And Naomi, standing there amid the long hallway filled with the smell of medicine, the sound of carts, the coughs of patients, remained like an unyielding pillar, signaling to any crawling snake that this hospital does not sleep, neither does justice. The final shift ended when the clock struck 3, yet the ICU machine still hummed. Naomi sat alone in the duty room, her shadow long against the white wall, with disinfectant droplets still clinging from the recent emergency shift. Outside the window, night wind slipped through the cracked glass, carrying the dampness of the just-ended early-season rain. She removed the name tag pinned on her chest, the plastic dusty with faint powder residue. Her thumb gently rubbed the engraved letters, Naomi Carter, Chief of Security at Central Hospital. A name long scorned by many simply because it belonged to a black woman. They forgot, or purposely ignored, that the frightening thing was not the skin color, but the mind behind it. Her personal laptop was open in front of her. Naomi toggled through tabs. The next file glimmered in a neatly named folder, Serpents_2, lists of names, evidence, internal emails, threatening recordings, and leaked financial reports. Everything was ready, just waiting for one click. Except today, she was no longer alone. The public had seen who truly feared handcuffs. Her phone, set to silent, vibrated softly. She glanced at the screen. An unknown number. She answered. A reporter's trembling voice hurried through. "Ms. Carter, just a few minutes, only a few questions. About Grady? The public is boiling. Do you want to send a message?" Naomi blinked, fingers tracing a faded red mark on the desk, a handcuff scar snug around her wrist. She interrupted softly, like a lullaby. "Truth speaks for itself. I don't need to shout for it." Then she hung up. The call light returned to silence, just as Naomi always chose. No noise, only letting truth do its work. Another message arrived almost simultaneously. Unknown number, short sentence. "You will regret it. This time no one will save you." Naomi neither frowned nor sneered. She read, held down, then deleted it, leaving only quiet in the duty room. Threats did not make her lose a single hair. If afraid, she wouldn't stand firm to expose the snake nest in broad daylight. She tapped her fingertips lightly on the desk, rhythm soft as a blade scraping a whetstone. The image of Grady shoved into a patrol car flashed by, dragging a string of others still scrambling to blame, excuse, and erase evidence. Naomi did not bother counting names. She knew the snake blood was not clean, and she knew the snake blood would stain her hands for a long time, but so what? Wynette sat across from her, took her hands in hers, steadied them both. "Oh, fuck." The chair creaked as Naomi leaned back, eyes fixed on the pale gray ceiling. Her breath exhaled, curling in the air thick with disinfectant and patient sweat. A heavy sigh like a reminder to herself. As long as she lived, she would keep sharpening the knife. As long as she was awake, justice was not allowed to sleep. In the corner of the ceiling, a security camera, tiny like an ant's eye, silently blinked red. It captured Naomi simply as a woman in medical scrubs, shoulders still stained with dried blood, hands resting lightly on the laptop keyboard. An ordinary person, yet her breath was enough to make the snake nest shrink deep into the shadows, afraid of the light carried by a whisper. The final click made no sound. The file, serpents_2, vanished from Naomi's computer, appearing in an encrypted inbox. Waiting for an authorized hand to open it, Naomi closed her eyes and quietly muttered, "Justice, once awakened, spares no one." Outside the window, the night wind gently caressed the handcuff scar, now a silent metal. Deep in Naomi's heart, the knife continued to be sharpened minute by minute, to teach the snakes to crawl into the light or stay still and die. Naomi Carter's story was not just a slap to a corrupt officer's face, but a living proof of the truth. Never judge others hastily when you still view them through prejudice. Talent, character, and value cannot be buried simply because of skin color or title. Most importantly, justice, no matter how long silenced, will eventually find a way to win as long as someone dares to stand and lead it into the light. Have you ever been misjudged because someone failed to understand you? Have you ever been underestimated and quietly proven you were better than they thought? If this story touches you, share it so others can learn, and those who abuse power will fear the light of justice. And don't forget to subscribe to follow more inspiring and raw true stories we bring you every week.